Yep, we're in Oscar's backyard, sitting on the mini ramp, chilling.
San Jose Ramp Club mini ramp at that.
So how old's this ramp?
Well, this is...
Was this the tight quarter to the left of the...
So the only part is just the 16-foot section, 16-foot wide mini section. That's
okay.
The original. The rest I added on, so...
I'm just trying to remember what ramp this was, because you had the box jump.
This was the mini ramp. The mini ramp, where the vert ramp used to be.
Okay.
They cut that down. They cut the vert down. They made it a mini.
Okay, see, I only rode there when it was the vert ramp.
Yeah, so the mini ended up right where the vert ramp used to be.
That vert ramp was pretty fun. I liked that vert ramp.
It's a great vert ramp.
Do you remember...
Oh, yeah. I remember the vert ramp vividly.
I don't know if you remember that night, but I remember... You might not have been there, but I remember we were riding it one time, and my buddy John Bristol was airing the ramp, and, he could go... He was a borderline pro vert rider, you know. He was going pretty high, and his DX pedal just snapped in the peak of an air. Like, it probably was just...
How do you snap it in the middle of the air?
He went up, and then I just remember seeing this thing shoot, and his foot just flailed. He just fell in and ate shit. It was like the weirdest... Yeah, I've seen him pump a ramp, like he was just pumping to get up it. Pumped it like 2 feet, and he had these Mongoose DMC cranks, and they just snapped while he was pumping, and he just flipped over the bars and wrecked. Oh my God. I've seen him out a few times where anything bad, he would have just like, if he was riding hard, he would have died, and he just got lucky. So, but yeah, you grew up in this area, right?
Yeah, I grew up in pretty much about an hour from here, about an hour.
In what town?
Yeah, in Castro Valley originally. Then we moved to Danville, and pretty much when I was in Castro Valley, I came up here to ride Calabasas.
Yeah,
I met Oscar and all the rest of the Norcal guys, and
Calabasas is super legendary
dirt jumps.
They're still there, right?
Still there.
They've been there since
70s.
I got people that go back to that place in the very early 70s, late 60s, when people were riding, mini bikes out there.
Yeah.
And let people just taking whatever bicycles they had and going out there and just riding the creek trails, and that's where it started.
So it's got some deep history.
It's got a lot of deep history.
You were racing before that, weren't you? The only reason I know you raced is, I got that Sponsor Me tape of yours. We'll touch on the Sponsor Me tape later. But you were a racer kid?
Yeah. Well, originally when I was like 8 years old or something like that, I got a Hot Streak, a Diamondback Hot Streak.
Yep.
And that was my first bike, and I loved it. And Rad came out, and, I got
when were you born?
I was born in 79. So 40.
Oh, I always feel like you're younger than me. Yeah, so you were old enough to... I mean, I got into it because of Rad, too, but I'm just 3 years older. I thought I was way older than you.
No, yeah. So I watched Rad, and I was in it, but, it was a big bike. I was a little kid.
Yeah.
I couldn't do much on it, right? I mean, you could launch off a curb or whatever, but I couldn't do much on it. So I started skating, and then I skated for several years.
Yeah.
And then when I got to be, right around 12, getting, 12 and a half or whatever, then I got another bike. I don't even remember what it was, but I got a different bike, and then I started getting into, jumping.
Yeah.
There was a jump. I jumped, and I was doing one-handers, one-footers, and then, that point I knew that the only jumps would be the racetrack, so I started racing.
Yeah.
And then raced for a few years, got better at jumping, and then eventually I just sort of transitioned to jumping.
Yeah.
But the first time I ever rode a ramp, I don't think this was the first ramp I ever rode. The first ramp I ever rode, I went to 93 Grands in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was racing, I think 13 Expert.
And that's when they started having, like, the dirt jump contest.
King of Dirt was there.
Yeah, King of Dirt was there.
And I was like...
Was 93 the one where Moeller did the no-hander with the
I think so.
rocket on his back?
Yeah.
I think so.
And I was just blown away, and then Hoffman Estates was right there. Hoffman Park. And
which was the most epic skate park at that time.
And I remember driving into the parking lot, and the super quarter was there, but it was toppled over, right?
Because it's Oklahoma, it probably got blown over.
Yeah, that's what they said. They said, I remember the talking, I was like, what happened? And I had no idea he had done the...
So that was just a straight... That wasn't even up against anything. It was just a straight quarter pipe.
You pulled in the parking lot, and it was out there, and it was toppled over. And I was just like, what? And then there was all the ramps there, and I actually... if you watch the sponsor tape...
I have it.
If
you want, Cam, I can post it up for people.
No, that's fine. We'll pass on that. But if you watch that, if you watch that tape, I actually am carving the opposite way that I carve now.
Okay.
Because I didn't know then. I had never hit a ramp before, and so the only thing I could touch was like I could drop in, and I would go over the box, and I would carve the opposite way. And I kind of just ride the wall ride. Because I didn't know what I was doing. It was the first ramp. Then I could come back and pedal as fast as I could. And it was on a purple anodized elf. I was doing X-ups, and doing things like that. Joey Garcia was there, but I had no idea who he was yet.
One of my buddies rode for Elf. He was about your age. You may have raced him.
Maybe.
Do you remember Tyler Shaw?
Yeah.
Anyway, he rode for Elf. So.
Yeah. But that was the point where I was almost sort of like over racing.
Yeah.
I was just hitting the jumps, finding the best one to do tricks on, and I would just session that. I wasn't practicing racing.
Yeah.
I would snap the gate and go on the first turn as fast as I could. Then I kind of let everyone go, and then I'd just trick whatever jump was the best trick jump. But, I was riding there every night, so I'd go to the races on my parents'
Was that a public skate? I mean, did you open it to the public? Like,
it was open to, I was able to ride it.
Okay.
Right?
I didn't know if it was like a private skate park or if it was like...
Yeah, and then the day, I had my parents bring, every second I wasn't racing, I had them take me there. That trip. And then one morning I went out there, and I remember I was out there. I'm the only one riding the park, all by myself in the morning, early morning, right? And I'm just like so stoked to hit like a real jump. You know what I mean? I just could not get enough of it. And I'm sitting out there, and then Jay Miron comes out, and it's the morning of King of Dirt.
Yeah.
And so
Jay was killing it,
right? And he gets his pads on, and I'm just like sitting up there, and it's just Jay.
And you knew it was Jay Miron.
No.
You just saw some hella freestyle dude.
I just super freestyle. His bike was freestyle.
Yeah.
Full gear, right? And he dropped in. He did 5 hits, and he did he did a huge truck driver, and I was just like, whoa, I'm blown.
And in '93, that was like,
just a
I remember
huge
seeing people
truck.
do those.
Yeah, a huge tail whip. He did one of my favorite tricks, and I did this after. And I learned one of my biggest goals was to learn this trick was Jay doing the. He used to go and he used to do the one-hander to bar spin to catch one-hander the other way. And it was the sickest trick. I remember he just like, and just like caught it and and I was like in love. And then he just did this massive backflip, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just huge backflip where he barely came in the landing, and it was so epic, and I was basically sold at that.
Do you have that Condor with the green spokes on it then?
Yeah, I don't remember. I think so. He may have. Yeah,
oh,
he may have had that.
That's when Jay was on fire.
Dude, he was just,
He came to Merino Valley with that bike with the green spokes.
Yeah.
Just destroyed everybody.
Oh, he murdered
it.
I remember watching him and Mira ride that Merino Valley spine, and Taj too at that one contest, and it was nuts. So you go to the races and you come home,
and at that point, my parents were super into it at that point, and I was just like, I wasn't feeling it. I think I was 14 intermediate, to be honest.
Okay.
At that time, I think I was 14 intermediate. I was born in '79. I think it was '93 when that was. I was 14 intermediate. I had won Gold Cup as 14 intermediate. By the time I got to expert, they were all so serious.
Oh yeah,
and
you have to start kind of lifting weights and stuff.
Yeah, and I was just I was not that serious about it. I just wanted to freestyle, and by that point, I was full on. I just say, hey, I'm way more into jumping, and by that point I was just trying to venture off to find people to ride with.
Yeah.
Eventually made it to Calabasas, and then I found when I showed up to Calabasas the first time, saw Nyquist and Butthead and all the guys there. I mean, I popped out with a full purple elf, double cross, number plate, everything else, and so purple open face helmet, and these guys were just freestyle guys.
Nyquist was always a pretty pure freestyle dude, right?
Yeah, he never raced.
Yeah, I never raced either.
Yeah, Butthead never raced. They were full on chest protectors, and they were full on freestyle guys. Yeah, but it was crazy like that. Yeah, chest protectors, and then it just sort of took on from there.
That kind of became your crew, right?
Yeah, that became my crew.
And then how you guys were? What you said, 14 then?
Yeah, we were 14. Yeah.
Did Ryan have a goatee at 14?
No. Ryan.
Wouldn't it have been great if he just did?
He had some of the worst smelling pads I've ever smelled, though. They were really bad.
I think anybody in the early 90s, just lived in their pads.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, just lived in the
I remember if you were done riding, I just kind of relaxed the thing and just let them fall onto your shin.
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, shit, I could get ratted
I still do that. People are like, why are you still in your pads? I'm like, it's just
I always draw the line with, you had that one homie that you'd be fully done riding for 3 hours, and he'd be sitting in the house eating a bowl of cereal with his helmet still on, where you're like, dude, you got to take it off. We're done.
Yeah.
There's always that one helmet guy.
Yeah.
So
The helmet wear. Yeah. No, I didn't do that, but I left my pads on a long time. And once I started riding for 2-hip, and they had the, he made the pads that were like the cloth material.
Yeah.
They all, and I had a pair I wore out, and I wore those under, and then I wore the other ones over. So I wore double pads, double shin pads, and they, then my shins were actually in pretty good condition.
Yeah.
As opposed to the rest of my body.
Those 2-hip shin pads were gnarly.
Yeah, they were very protective. Yeah.
So how did you guys kind of, I'm just trying to put the pieces together. So you guys are riding Calabasas, and there's probably, when you were riding Calabasas, there's probably still an older crew like, Oscar, were you riding still there at that time?
Yeah, I was still riding when, I remember little groups of people, and like Cam coming along, and it was a group of guys from another place called Red Devil.
Okay.
Another dirt jump place in Fremont. So I remember first meeting Cam, he came out with a guy named Dan Agnew and a couple guys that rode that place.
Yeah.
And they heard about Calabasas and came out. And for me riding out there, it was like some of the older guys that I was riding with already kind of moved on. Didn't Steve Veltman, like Terry Tennant ride out there? Well, back then, early Veltman, Terry Tennant was out there, Cecil Johns, Rob Carnahan, Dave Latimer. These were like that late 80s, early 90s, really Calabasas locals.
Yeah.
And there were a handful of other guys that, that were just locals.
And this was kind of like the new wave coming in.
Yeah, and I seen it. I mean, I seen the new wave, like I said, him and Dan Agnew and these other guys, and then you had the guys from Almaden, which were like Brian Jackson, which started the Ram Club, and those group of guys. I'm missing so many names. And then you had the Gilroy guys a little after that, and you had, actually I was riding with Jimmy Garcia before I met Cam. I mean, actually before he started bringing Joey around. So you had the Gilroy guys coming out, and it was Joey, Jimmy, Kagy.
That was a lot of the Ram Club. They would come to Cali sort of.
And this is
sporadically.
before the Ram Club. You just see little groups in them, but Cam was coming out with these other guys. From
me, Nyquist, Butthead, Squirrel.
It definitely seemed like that right there when the mid-90s came up, the Norcal scene just started exploding. And it
was the bar spin era, right?
Yeah.
It was sort of the even when it was like first starting, we were still like, we had the standard axles, we'd have backpacks with a bunch of standard axles.
Oh, you got to have those spares.
Yeah, you got to have those spares. Yeah, and it was like, and we were all like playing around with like street riding, and we were sort of in that like, we were all watching videos, and it was all like trying to ride everything we could, and that's when we started coming here, and you had the mini ramp, and there wasn't a lot of, there wasn't skate parks in every town then.
No.
Skate parks
I had a different ramp back here at that time.
Yeah.
A little smaller, 4.5 foot, 5 foot mini.
Yeah.
Just built it out of whatever I could. And, and we go to Calabasas and meet these guys, and those guys heard that I had a ramp. They were all blown away. They came here, and that was the first ramp that Nyquist ever rode. It was the first ramp I had back here.
Yeah.
The first time I remember seeing you, which probably not too long after, the first time I remember seeing you was in an Infection video that Scott had, in Infection 3.
Yeah, and that may have even been, that was even pre-2-hip, I think.
It was I think you're riding like a dirt bike? Or?
Yeah, I rode a dirt, so I went through a bunch of bikes, and eventually I landed on a dirt bike. I built up a Condor, like, I did one of those things where I started building, I was doing a lot of dirt jumping. Like, I learned double bar spins, bus drivers with no gyro. You know, putting my bars back the opposite way, and then I do double.
Yeah.
But in parallel, I was building a Condor up, like a sick Condor.
Oh, yeah.
Chrome Condor.
Definitely sick.
It was like, and I actually never really got to give that bike, what it was worth. Because by the time it was like starting to get built up, I got on 2-hip.
Okay.
And then ended up on 2-hip, and I don't even know what happened to the Condor.
That's a shame.
Yeah, I never really got to put good mileage on that because I was building it up and taking my time of like this perfect
and then you got
bike. Then I got on 2-hip. Yeah, but I went from, I think when he came down and it was Mutt, and I think the video I showed you
he came down and stayed with Mutt.
Was Infection 3,
It's
right?
Infection 3.
But I think it's Infection 2 is the one you're thinking about.
Were you in Infection 2?
Yeah, and that was where I believe he came down and we rode some street.
And if you guys aren't familiar, the Infection videos was like a series of Northwest videos that Scott Hagnes put together from about 1991 to the early 2000s.
Yep.
And I know in Infection 3 you have a lot of good, you and Nyquist have a bunch of good clips, but you're in 2?
I thought I was in 2. You
could be. I haven't seen him for a minute.
Yeah,
so.
I haven't seen him for a minute, and I asked Scott Hagnes, I think he's going to try to see if he had a copy of 2.
He keeps talking about doing a box set, which would be
That'd be awesome.
Super sick.
Yeah.
You know?
And when I got 3, I didn't even remember that I was on the cover. I like flipped it over. I'm like, oh, that's me on the back. But that was at my parents' house.
Yeah, because you had the box jump in the backyard.
Yeah, so that was at my parents' house. So that was in between. It had to have been probably when I was in 10th grade. Probably, 16 years old. 15, 16 years old for sure. So, and then I got sponsored. But I think I'm on a Chrome Stout Boy in Infection 3.
Okay,
I'm not on a dirt bike. I'm on a Chrome Stout Boy.
Okay.
Yeah, so because I'm on a Chrome Stout Boy, it tells you that I was past the Black Stout Boy.
Yeah.
Which was after the
prototype.
dirt bike. Yeah, and I think that the actual first one, I'm a really young kid, and you guys, they came down and filmed at Mutt's, and me and Mutt are fighting in part of one of the credits.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, screw you, Mutt. You know what I mean? Because, when you're hanging around Mutt, what's your like the guy who's always with Mutt, which I think George is right now, right?
Mutt's super Norcal OG.
Mutt's Norcal, yeah.
Done a lot for the scene, and been around forever.
Big support of the Norcal scene, and always in there, and
always had a house, always had a place for people to crash coming through, and
well, I moved to Danville, and for one, my parents, they're moving me in the middle of high school, and we had this lot up top, and they're like, well, you can build a box jump up there. So that was like one thing, right, which was amazing to move to Danville. And that was in between 9th and 10th grade. But I met, one of my best friends, and we went riding down, and we're riding down into downtown Danville. We ride past this parking lot, and there's this guy flat landing, right?
Yeah.
And it's Gabe Weed.
Okay.
And he's just shredding in this parking lot, and I pull in. I'm like, oh, what's up, man? I know he's a flatland guy.
That's probably where Scott and you guys met.
Well, that happened. That's how me and Mutt met.
Okay.
Right? And I remember Gabe told me then, he's like, well, I was telling him, I'm like, I do double bar spins, and he's like, that was way back, and he saw I didn't have a gyro, and he's like, I thought you were full of shit. Like, you weren't doing double bar spins on that bike. But I was like, no, I got to jump. And then I met Mutt there, and that's how I sort of got introduced to Mutt, which, ended up getting introduced to the Solid guys up in Sacramento. Yep. And, that sort of...
the scene was so rich down here. It's always been rich, but it just seemed like that time every town had thick crews, like...
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier, like the change of where you consider old school to... Mid-school. Yeah. It's like, I think the bar spin was like the change of that era, because literally Cam and Ryan probably the first person, or I think Cam was really the first person I saw that did like a complete full bar spin.
Yeah.
Back then, the only people that were doing anything like that, Bob Cole was doing
Todd,
half Bob, Todd, yeah, but, in an air, like Bob was doing like the half bar spin and variations in them, and then there was a couple other quarter pike riders, the Jeremy Alder and his brother.
So, Jeremy Alder, I'm pretty sure invented them.
Yeah.
Even though Moeller, everybody's like, oh, it's Moeller, and Jeremy Alder, I think, invented it on a quarter pipe.
Yeah.
Because he had a sequence in like 87 or 88 on a Haro tour. Just burr it. Like, it just seems so crazy.
But like off a dirt jump, like literally just full on bar spin, was Cam and Nyquist. And if we had a certain jump at Calabasas Hills, like a step up jump, that was like our foam pit.
Yep, I've rode it.
And these guys would just throw them all fucking day.
All day.
Just learn bars. Then literally the first truck I really saw was Cam throwing a truck. Yeah. And then he kept doing them. I saw him do like 1.5s and like right out of it, barely right out of it. And we were just like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. Yeah, you hit the step up, or you hit hill, which is almost like a lip to flat. Really.
No, yeah, it was to the left of to the step up, right? Or was it to the right?
No, it was in the back, and it was just a lip, and it kind of went up a little bit more of a hill, and there was a sidewalk, but you're just coming to flat.
Yeah.
And then you would go to cave step, which was the step up, and then if you could do a cave step, and then towards the second half of the day, it's like we're going to nut. We're going to do. It
almost sounds like the 30 trails that Dave Tom grew up on. There'd be the 32.
Yeah.
And then there's the fly out, the 32, which was a shorter step up, and then the 30, which was a 30-foot long step up jump.
Yeah.
And in Calabasas, like if you learn something on hill, and like I said, you can take it to nut and do it.
Yeah.
Then you had it. You can do over.
Yeah. Once you've done it over like the full, the trifecta from hill to cave step
you
to
had
nut,
that trick, and
you had the trick.
Yeah.
And the way I rode back then is that you had your bag of tricks, and you're always thinking. You just eat, sleep, breathe, BMX, watch videos every night. And then what you would do is you'd go back out the next weekend, and you'd be learning stuff in the back, right? You'd have these tricks that you were sort of close on, or you were pulling here and there. And then you go to nut, and then the sessions always were like, you just went through your bag, right?
Yeah.
Until at the end of your bag, if you pulled your whatever was your biggest trick at the time, well, then you just went right, boom, go for the next, go to get the
whatever
trick.
The next notch is.
Whatever the next notch is, right? It
Tail
was like
whip or something.
Whatever it was, you were just, and a lot of it was like, double bar spins. Double bar spins were big back then.
That's a killer. That'll fuck you up, a double bar spin, trying to learn those things.
Well, I remember back in the time, there wasn't a lot of people.
Out of them clean,
and double trucks, that was like, there was very select few doing double trucks.
Yeah, like maybe McCoy.
Yeah.
Miron?
I think Miron was doing them, and
McCoy was the first one I saw do a double.
And we went to that Merino Valley contest. It was it was not the BS. There was another contest, and it was over the box jump. It was a jump contest at Merino Valley.
Was that after 95?
Yes, that was after 95.
Yeah, I think you got some photos from there.
Yeah, and I recently, and I remember at the time we were going, and Mike Griffin was in it, Nyquist, there was
Pete Augustin was there.
Yeah, a bunch of Sean Yarrell.
Yeah. I think Sean Yarrell was there with Pete Augustin because I remember it was maybe in a 20-inch video magazine or maybe an early props. And you're like, this is a weird mix of dudes.
Yeah. It was like a couple generations, right?
Yeah.
And it was like that generation, but it was like bar spins were like the craze right then. And I remember at that time, like, I was on my bar spin game, and like, it was in the finals. I did a Superman. I did the no-handed suicide.
The box jump was kind of little too.
I was like, at the time it was like a normal box. Right, I mean the boxes weren't huge back then. A 5-foot box that was like
8 foot long.
Yeah, 5 foot tall.
I tried 180 in that thing.
Yeah,
and I landed at the bottom of the landing and got jacked on that thing.
It was a good standard box. It was like the one I had in my backyard. So it felt normal to me. So I did like the double bar, suicide no hander, and caught it. The Superman. I did a big old no footed can, and then in the end I did the suicide double truck, which was big, right? But Mike Griffin, he was doing, did the tricks, and he tried it and crashed, right?
His trucks were loose.
Yeah,
they were so sick when they were done, but his bike would be dropping.
Straight nosedive, and it went 1.5, and he bailed. And he tried, I think, to do a double bar, and he did a double bar like a 1.5 or something, but he won, and like I got like 4th, and I remember thinking like what's going on? Like I just threw down like the 4. It was like
that was your welcome to BMX.
Oh, I was like defeated, right? And I remember the one redeeming thing is that someone wrote in. There's like when people would write into BMX Plus and they would do like they'd write.
Ask the BM experts.
Yeah, ask the BM experts, exactly. Right? Ask the BM experts, right? And they went in there and they're like, the judges must have been drunk. Cam Birdwell won that contest, blah blah blah. And I remember feeling like
the judges were like, if we get Griffin to win, he's buying us beer after this.
Well, later on, like a couple years later, Jay Miron, we ended up talking about this at some contest, me and Jay Miron. And Jay Miron's like, oh no, like after that contest, and he was there. He's all after that contest. He's like, we actually. He goes, I don't remember when it was, but he said they recalculated. He's like, you actually won that contest. We just calculated the scores wrong. But I think it was like too late at that time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think like once they announce who's the winner, right at that point it's probably too late.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just a young kid, so but that was that was like the beginning.
Now, did you go, because I know when I met you, because I knew of you because we were both in the infection videos.
Yeah.
But when I met you was at the 95 Merino Valley, where it had the amateur contest was on the 5 or 6 foot, and then pro was on
the big ramp.
On the big ramp, which that spot.
Basically, if you could ride that big ramp, you were pro.
Yeah, I jumped that spine once and about pissed my pants.
Yeah, it was so clear if you weren't pro.
That definitely you could definitely see. You were like, oh, this guy's riding this ramp really good.
Yeah,
but then you saw like Asado or Miron or somebody.
Stuart King.
Yeah. God, there was some. Yeah. I'm so glad.
Akabak.
Yeah. That was like right before Akabak kind of disappeared.
But Jay Miron owned everybody. So on that ramp.
My favorite that contest, you had Jay Miron, Dave Mira doing nothings over it. I remember McCoy.
Yeah.
You had Taj.
Yeah.
I remember he tried downside whipping it and got jacked.
Yeah.
And then Miron, and he was doing like the tooth grinds through the corner.
Yeah.
And then Asado had just turned pro at the contest before at Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
And like he was from up my way, so I knew he was going to fuck shit up. But it was so heavy.
Yeah.
I think Rooftop started riding pro.
He tried to grind the rail from the vert down.
Well, that was the year before, wasn't it?
Was that?
I'd get those two bit contests.
I remember Jay doing like the 270 to double peg to hop over the spine.
Yeah.
And just like in the middle of his run, just bink, and he'd hop over. Stephen Prantle was in that.
Talking Merino Valley?
Yeah. I mean, those Merino Valley contests for the mid 90s were so iconic.
Yeah.
The vert ramp was a bit shoddy.
Yeah.
But the 7 foot, it was going to be a bloodbath.
I remember getting there late Friday night, or I think it was Friday night practice, and over the spine they had a big pole extended with the lights on it.
Oh, yep.
And Jay did a flat table 3 over that spine, and he was fucking over that light pole. He was like 7.5 feet out.
Yeah.
And right then and there, you're just like, Jesus Christ, over the spine. It was just massive, huge.
Yeah, I think at the one I was at, I think that it was like Dave was coming back from I think when he got hit by the car.
Yeah, no,
and he was like kind of chubby.
Yeah, but he was still killing it.
He was still killing it, but I
remember Dave rode. I think he got hurt. I think
he was like just back, or he was. I couldn't remember.
I do remember him doing a nothing over the spine.
Yeah, doing a nothing.
I think he got hurt
before the contest.
Before the actual. I don't think he entered that actual event. That one that.
Yeah.
That
but I was whatever intermediate at that, and I was.
Were we in the same class?
I was like trying to like bar.
Did you ride the 7 foot?
No.
We rode the 6 foot with the spine with the hip.
Yeah, with the hip.
I tried to do a front flip flyout.
Yeah, and the kid was who's the little kid that used to do the front. He used to do the front flip, jump off his bike, and do the 180.
Was it that kid from
Arizona? I forget his name.
I thought he was from Colorado. I know who you're talking about.
He's a little kid, Danny Williams. No.
Yeah, Danny Williams.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
he was there, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was there, and I was just trying. Like the only thing I could do at the time was pretty much jump. So it was like I was trying to like just throw bars over the hip or bars over the spine. I don't even remember, but it wasn't much.
Yeah, I just never rode spine, so I was like learned feeble overs.
Yeah.
So I was like doing some foot plants and like.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so okay, let's back it up a little. Two things I wanted to ask you. I wanted to touch on you getting on Two Hip.
Yeah.
Because that was your first sponsor.
Yep.
But we were talking about videos. What were you were like, I always watch videos. What were like some of the videos that you watched back in the day that were just...
I mean, some of the icon. I mean, the first one I called up Dan's when I was like really like, all right. Basically when I got back when I got back from Grands, I was like basically, I'm freestyle now, right? And I remember calling Dan's and like going, I want the best video. You know what I mean? I want the best tricks. I want to see the whatever's the best trick video, and they sent me right on. So that was like my first video.
That's a good starting base.
Yeah. So my first, and I remember I was telling you, I was like so bummed after I first watched it. I'm like, I'm never gonna do these tricks.
Oh,
right?
It seemed impossible.
Watching Chad Harrington, like. I mean, you do it. I mean, still, like, if you were watching, he was like doing cans and wrapping his foot around the. Like, I was like, that's not even possible. Like, how is that even gonna happen? And he was doing bar spins. Remember
for the Vic Murphy part, because I'm like, okay, this seems realistic.
Yeah, but then, like, I mean, some of my all-time favorites back then were like Unlock Your BMX, Dirty Deeds, obviously. Oh yeah. I loved Ride On back then, but.
Right On had so much soul to that video.
Juvenile Trickery. I love Juvenile Trickery.
Oh, that was a good one, yeah.
That was a good one. But, I was staying around Mutt by the time I was in Danville, so I had, like, a huge genre. That's how I learned all my history, was watching Mutt's videos.
Yeah, that went way back.
We just go over there and, we'd party at Mutt's and, hide our beers in the... big gulps, because he wouldn't let us drink, so we'd stick the beers in the big gulps and put the straw through. But we just watched BMX videos, and he'd let me borrow them, and I'd take them home and watch them. But I built up a pretty good collection of like a couple hundred videos.
Oh wow,
yeah,
good.
A couple hundred videos, and there was As the Wheel Goes Round, like all these old videos.
I don't think I've ever seen that one.
Oh yeah, like a lot of the East Coast videos, the ECD videos. I watched all those, and wheelies, and everything back then. So.
Yeah. So how did you end up meeting Ron and getting on Two Hip?
That was, Calabasas, and he knew I was a jumper, and I was doing the bar spins, and he came to me right when he was starting the Stout Boy. And
so when you met Ron, Wilkerson Airlines was pretty much dead. It was
Wilkerson Airlines was dead. It was Two Hip.
Okay.
Yeah, from what I understood.
Yeah.
And he came with the prototype Stout Boy, and I switched to riding that when I was 15.
Talk about that prototype you were telling me earlier.
Yeah. I mean, it had a head tube. It was like, it was choppered back. I mean, I always pretend I'm like, it was like a 60-degree head tube angle. I mean, it was like so choppered back. My bars were in my lap, and like I was saying, I remember getting on that bike. I was so stoked, right? It's a freestyle bike.
And it's super freestyle looking.
Yeah, well, I went from the dirt bike to that.
So
right?
you're like big tubes.
I went. It was kind of like me going, all right, well, I'm a jumper. I was a total dirt jumper, and that was my strength and really what I was good at. So like, all right, I'm getting on a freestyle bike, and now I have to like start learning to freestyle. Like I got to start learning ramps and everything. You know, much better. But it was a real hard bike for me to get used to because it was so kicked back in the head tube angle.
And it was still, I think, 19-inch top tube.
Yeah, I don't remember. I couldn't tell you the measure.
It's weird because it was like sold as a flatland frame, but I feel like ramp dudes just rode it.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, to be honest, I couldn't tell you the measurements of any bike I've ever ridden.
I can believe that.
Yeah, I don't know any of the parts of my bike. You know, I can usually tell you what frame I'm riding, and I don't know anything else. And I've always been like that, right? But so even when the thing was on, I'm like, oh, I just chalked it up to a bike that was hard for me to get used to.
Yeah,
I didn't really have to go. It's a freestyle bike is different, but it was real hard for me to do all my tricks that I could do, let alone. But then
bar spins with the mellow head tube.
Bar spins were really hard. You know, 360s were really weird. But I started learning stuff. Started learning ramps. You know, I went to Woodward as a camper.
Oh wow!
When I was 15.
Who's your counselor?
It was Joe and Taj.
Oh shit!
Right, and you know who were my campmates was Nate Wessel.
He was your camp.
Sean Dorton. We were in the same cabin together. Right?
I cannot picture Nate Wessel. Did Nate have dreads?
No, he wasn't. He was just a kid on a bike. Just like
I can't even picture Nate as a kid. He's always been such a fucking caveman.
No, yeah, me, Sean Dorton, Nate Wessel, and Joe and Taj were the counselors.
Wow.
And that's where I remember learning manuals on the Stout Boy. Like they had a little bowl with like a hip corner in it, and like a big over tent. And
that little like 3-foot bowl they have there.
Yeah, and you know, I went out there, but I was the only one who was sponsored, right? And so I was just like with all the other kids learning ramps and doing all this stuff. But when they'd whip out the box on like the thing, like then people were like, whoa, like this guy can jump.
Was the Resi there yet?
No, it wasn't even a thing.
Yeah.
Resi wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Not that I knew of. I hadn't seen it. I would have been all over it.
I think the first Resi footage was that Schwinn video with Miron when he learned like double flip on it.
Probably, yeah. There's no Resi, no foam, but they had like a portable box that they brought out. And then I was busting Supermans, and like I was really throwing my tricks. People were like, all right, like he can go. But I was like, you know, I was 15. I was sneaking cigarettes under the ramp. You know what I mean? I was sort of a little...
Do you have that long hair then?
I had long hair. Gorgeous, you know what I mean?
I've seen the glamour shots.
Yeah. I was you know.
I was really big old long blonde.
Oh, I remember you had like double rubber bands.
No, I never double tied.
I swear you double tied.
No, I never double. It was a Sulot, and you know.
It was a Sulot.
And I kept it. I kept my hair in nice. You know.
How do you feel about when you see kids nowadays with Sulots? You're like, yo, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're trying to, bite my style, but it's fun.
So you went to you went to Woodward and you actually started learning some more like...
I was really trying to learn ramps.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I was really trying to, you're wanting to be like, at that time, like, when I first started riding, like with the pros were like flatland, vert, jumping, park, like you had the McCoys, the Mirons. So when I first started riding, that's what I pictured as like...
I think...
It wasn't one discipline.
I think a lot of dudes our age, when you started riding and you thought about how good you had to be, it was like, you're like, I got to put this shit on the line. Because these dudes are so... The level of pro...
Yeah, you could ride anything.
It was just like, you were like, oh my gosh,
And I used to actually worry that, like, when I was really getting started, and later on it started fading, but when I was really first getting started, I mean, I couldn't flatland to save my life. I couldn't do anything, right? I mean, just about nothing. I could do like a nose. I couldn't do any sort of, really anything. The most I ever got was like a decade on the ground or like a one whiplash or something like that. I couldn't do anything. I remember thinking like, I'm never going to be.
Because all those pros were still really good flatlanders.
Really good flatlanders, yeah. And so I used to always be like, I'm never going to be like that. But, then at least, but I definitely knew I wanted to get better at ramps. And there just wasn't a lot to ride. You know what I mean? There wasn't a lot. So it's like, you get there, but I came back from Woodward, and I was better. I could do long grinds. I could hop over spines. I could jump spines. Yeah, and so it started getting better then.
And so at that time, you were kind of, because you were kind of on that same age as like Kagy, Nyquist.
Yep.
Was Ryan already riding for Bontrager then and starting to go to some bigger contests, or were you guys quite there?
I think Ryan was riding for Bontrager right around when I was first starting on Two Hip, or at least shortly afterwards.
And Chad was kind of getting stuff from Solid, maybe?
You have to remember that. I mean, when Ryan went to college, when he graduated, he went to college.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that, yeah.
And you know, whether it was his parents or whatever the case was, like, he went to college, like, went to go to, like, San Luis Obispo or somewhere down south. Like, he went to go to college, so it's like he hadn't fully, like, jumped in, like, I'm going to be a pro BMXer by the time he was 18. So before that, it was still sort of like, you know, I think it was Bontrager, and I think it was Haro when he got to be about 18. And he went to that one contest, and he, like... Did
you ever enter any of those X-Trials contests?
Yeah, X-Trials. Well, there was one year, I think it was 98. It was either 97 or... So I won Stunt Boy Street in 90. I won Stunt Boy overall for the year in 96.
Okay.
And I think I was 16, 17. And I won, you know, I got third, second, and then I got first.
And where were those contests at?
Stunt Boy. And, you know, I know that the last one was in New York.
Okay. Now, was that the X-Trials ramps at that time? Or
no, this is Stunt Boy. This is BS Series.
Okay, I'm just trying to picture which skate parks they were at.
I don't remember. Yeah. But they were BS, they were set up courses, right?
Yeah.
They were built courses. They weren't like existing parks.
Oh, yeah, so they were like the
but this is before that was X, before they sold to X.
Yeah.
And then the next year I turned pro, which I believe, I'm guessing that he sold it to X Games in between 96, 97.
Yeah.
Right? And then the next year was the first year I turned pro, and I was 17 or 18, you know, and then there was that one contest down south, I think it was Seal Beach, where me, Chad, Nyquist...
Is that the one where Chad had the Confederate flag helmet?
Oh, yeah, and he dropped in off the wall ride.
Yep.
And I think it was like 4 of us, right, from Norcal that made the top 10.
No, I remember seeing
we came in hot and heavy on that contest.
It seemed like it from like the outside looking in.
Norcal was on fire there. Like, we came in hot, and that was all Ramp Club.
Chad did the backflip off the little ramp, too.
Yep, I was doing big old suit. I had that one pager, the Superman seat. I was riding a green big boy.
Yep. Oh, that bike actually looked kind of sick.
Yeah, it was a green big boy. Nyquist was on fire then. That was an X-Trials.
Butthead was in that one too?
No, Butthead wasn't in that one. I thought maybe Joey. I wouldn't say I'm positive. I know me, Chad, and Nyquist.
Joey was on Schwinn probably by then.
Yeah, he was on Schwinn. I think Joey too. But I can't be for certain. But I know at least me, Chad, and Nyquist.
How'd that feel, like all you guys doing good?
Oh, it was epic. You know what I mean?
Because were you all still pretty tight?
Yeah, we were all tight. I mean, I drove down there with Chad.
Yeah.
Right? I had driven down there with Chad, and you know, we were all tight. You know, me and Nyquist sort of grew up riding together. You know, I mean, obviously we're opposite ends of the spectrums. I was, you know, pretty wild off the bike.
Smoking cigs under the ramp.
Yeah, smoking. I was a party machine, and Nyquist pretty much had his head on straight.
Yeah.
You know, which is pretty evident, and you know, if you look at how he is today, I mean, he's pretty much the enigma, right? So
yeah, he's turning into the new Dennis McCoy.
Yeah,
he's going.
Yeah, he's the new DMC. But you know, we were always riding together and pushing each other back in those days for sure. So, but yeah, that was like the NorCal, like we're here to like take some names. We're almost half of the main, and there was like 35 riders in that event.
I just, you know, Ramp Club sessions.
Yeah.
You know, you go to the Ramp Club, you don't get there till 7, 8 o'clock at night. It's too hot to ride during the day inside that warehouse. We get there late.
Yeah.
Sessions went on late through the night, but you know, watching Cam, Ryan, Kagy, Joey, Jimmy, Butthead, and trying to mix in with that shit. But watching these guys all feed each other, you saw the whole change. You saw all these new tricks coming out, and these guys just throwing some really big shit.
Yeah.
You know, so by the time they go to those contests and riding with each other, you know, they were on fire.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a big change.
In Ramp Club, I mean, we haven't even touched Ramp. I mean, Ramp Club was such a big thing for the scene.
Huge.
When did Ramp Club start? How did that all come about?
97, 96.
So, as I mentioned in Calabasas, there was a group of guys that came from Almaden, and one of them was Brian Jackson.
Okay.
And he was just a local rider, loved the sport, loved to ride, and he's the one that just, when I remember, kind of just stepped up. And at first it was like everybody pitching $50 a month or $50 a month.
You got a key.
You got a key, and he went and signed the lease and got the warehouse, and he already had sections. I think he had the vert ramp and some things already built in sections.
You brought me there the first time. You said they're building a skate park, and I was like, what? And I don't know if we were at Cali or we were here at your house, but we all went there, and I remember walking in, and they were building the vert ramp, and it was brand new, and I was like, holy shit, like there's...
It seemed pretty... I mean, I remember the first time walking in there, Because, yeah, you had to know somebody that had a key, so I knew you.
Yeah.
And,
But the first thing that was really built was just the vert ramp.
yeah.
You know, and then
So everybody's riding vert.
there was vert.
Yeah,
and
then there was like little. Then he did the wall ride, right?
And then there were
And the little quarter, little tiny 2 foot, 3 foot box,
Yeah.
And then we built the box, and the box had the curved landing. The first box had the curved landing,
which was pretty new for back then.
and it was 5 foot with a curved landing. It
And
was
that
a
was the
big.
thing
That was a
box.
big box. I remember the first time you had to pump the vert wall hard and high to clear that box because it was tight in there. It was really tight.
I think when these guys really got into knowing how to build ramps and knowing, especially with like that was the first killer box other than like Hoffman Estates that had like a curved landing.
Yeah.
You know, and Martistich was one of the guys that just really got into fucking building ramps and designing stuff and also with the wall ride in the box, I think when they built the Joe Mama quarter pipe, I mean everything just changed.
Yeah, they closed the door off.
Yeah.
Yeah, so back then the door used to be open. You'd come flying in, you go over the box back, you'd hit the wall, that, and you'd come out, and then eventually they closed the door and they built the Joe Mama ramp, which was all the way across.
Wide 9 foot,
and then it was
right?
like enclosed.
It was like 8.5, 9 foot quarter pipe was probably 10, 15 feet wide or something.
But that changed all of our riding, right? That changed all of our riding because now we were in a park where like you'd hit the spine, a quarter spine, grind.
Helped you guys for contests
Everything.
back then.
It was like you learned to. It wasn't like the pedal hit stop. You know what I mean? It was more like
it was more flow,
grind,
your air, hit the spine, land this, carve this.
You'd be hitting the box, alley oop grinds, like you'd be doing
that tight 6 foot quarter next to the vert wall,
and it had all the different size ramps and wall rides. So it's like when we got to the contest, it was like when you were going to like a wall ride or like just anything, it was like you were just used to it, right?
Yeah.
We were just used to all of that and the big box. So it's like when we started going there, like I think X Trials actually that year had a small box. I think it was actually, I don't think it was yet, but I think later on the contest that came like right after they started going the big 5 foot boxes.
Yeah.
And we were just, that was like right up, that was what we were hitting all the time. So it felt just perfect.
Yeah, because boxes definitely went from like, you know, like you said, like 4 foot tall, 8 foot top.
Yeah.
You know, maybe 9 foot landing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, look at this thing and you're like, that's a mini ramp lip I'm taking off of.
Yeah, it was huge, and you would fly on it, right?
And you were mortified the first time you hit it because you're like, I don't know how this thing's going to kick me.
Yeah, but you would launch off it. So that was, Ramp Club really, it made, I don't think it would have been the same for any of us at that point. Had we not had the Ramp Club, or at least we would have been trailing behind. You know?
What were so Ramp Club's always been kind of notorious for just being, you know, late sessions, parties.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What's some of the craziest things you've seen go down a ramp? Because I've heard, I got like flea bites from sleeping. Something bit my whole body from sleeping behind the vert wall one night.
Well, one thing real quick about the ramp clip is like it was a, if you didn't really know how to ride or jump a box or do an air on a quarter, you really couldn't have fun there because you had to learn to jump the box and do an air on the quarter to keep your speed to do anything. So until you got to that point, then it was fun because I'd see people come in there and be like, 10 minutes later, like they're at it.
A lot of people turned away. They'd come, they'd be like, I can't ride this place.
Yeah.
And if you were a kid, you would not. It was not kid friendly. Like you'd just be like, I don't know how to do anything here.
The way that was set up, it's like that became like just your normal nowadays type of park.
Yeah.
So it was way ahead of its time, you know.
Yeah.
Even me being an older rider coming to places like that, I'm used to having a quarter over here and a quarter over here and pedal your ass off or a ramp with a lot of flat bottom, but learning to flow and pump and keeping your speed and jumping this and channeling out of that, I mean, that was all new.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was pretty epic. Yeah, there was one time they used to have, remember the limo? I don't know if you remember the limo out front, and they had this limo out front, and we would usually, like, when there was kids still riding, like, you know, for us, usually the ramp club session started when closing time happened.
Yeah.
Right? We all had keys. We stayed there all night long, all the time, and we would just pretty much party all night, ride all night. But we'd wait till everybody was gone, all the kids and parents and, you know, rollerbladers or whoever was there. But we used to go out and there used to be this stretch limo that was just body shops surrounded it, right?
I remember that sitting there.
Yeah, body shops all around. And there used to be this old limo that was parked out there, and we just party in the limo, right, waiting for it to close. But one night we were out there, and you know, I don't know, there was a bunch of people in the back of the limo, and I'm sitting in the front, and I'm just, you know, kind of messing around, and didn't really sit we sit in the back, right? It's a big limo, but I'm sitting in the front seat. I don't even know why. And I hit the visor and the keys fall out, right? And I'm like, oh man, right? I'm like, I'm like, look, I got the keys here. They're like, what? So I turn in, it's got nothing, right? So we pop the hood, and the battery's disconnected, right? So we connect the battery, and next thing you know, like, we're starting the car. Like, we're starting the car. And so we went joyriding out that night. And I remember we were joyriding, but it kept dying on us, right? I remember we were...
That seems so... like the most obvious thing driving through town.
Well, it kept stalling out. Finally, the battery was, like, toasted, and we're at this gas station. And, like, you could start it, you could jump it, and it would only run for, like, a few minutes. And we're like, all right, we're going to have to jump this thing and get out of this gas station and get back to the ramp and park this thing, or else we're going to get busted. And I remember it was, like, one of those gas stations you pull out, and there's, like, a big divider, you know, the curb divider in the middle of the street. So we got it started, and I just pulled out, and, like, I felt like going right. I'd have to go down too far, and I'd end up dying in the middle of the road. So I just moshed this thing right over the middle curb thing.
Oh, my God.
And I remember the worst sound, like, in the middle of the car, it's all... I basically did like a double peg grind across the middle of the car, across this island. But we ended up getting back and staying out of jail that night.
Did the body shop or anybody ever...
No, they never found out. We disconnected the battery and put the keys back.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. So, but, you know, there was all kinds of, you know, late night, you know, there was all kinds of riffraff that came into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that came into that place at night. And you know, eventually, you know, there was people, we lived there. You know what I mean?
Because there was that skateboarder. Didn't Red live there, skateboarder?
Yeah, eventually Red lived under the vert ramp, and we had another guy, Marky Leal, who was like that old school pro skater. He lived under the quarter pipe, the far quarter pipe there. Eventually I got kicked out of where I was living, and I was living behind the wall ride. And so we were all just...
How old were you about then?
I would say 19.
So you just out of your parents' house?
Yeah, I came to San Jose, like... because the ramp club was open. I was already driving 3 nights a week from Danville to the ramp club, back and forth 3 nights a week. And so I turned 18, graduated, went on tour with Ron, and I got back and moved straight to San Jose. And just lived at the ramp club for like 2 years.
How was that first tour?
Oh, that was a Warped Tour. That wasn't even Warped Tour with Dave Tom. That was the
just the vert ramp?
No, it was me and it may have been Matt Sager.
Sager was, I think, on later.
No, Sager would have been on before. I was on one big tour with Sager. Cooter, we call him Cooter.
Yeah. He's super redneck.
Yeah. Well, the thing was, we were on tour, and he said he called someone a cooter. I'm like, what's a cooter?
Yeah, that's a term used for like redneck.
Yeah, and I go, what's a cooter? And he goes, well, that's a redneck. And I was like, we called him Cooter the rest of the time. He hated it. He hated it. The second he told me, I'm like, what's a cooter? He's all, cooter's like a redneck. I'm like, dude, you're a fucking cooter, right?
He's from the middle of nowhere in Washington.
Yeah, that was the first Warped Tour with Sean Burnham, rest in peace, and who else was with me on that? I think it was Matt Sager.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's when we traveled in an RV with Ron's band and us, 9 people in an RV, and we traveled in that. And then the next year I went on Warped Tour with Dave Tom, Dave Stevenson, and we were actually on a tour bus.
Yeah.
We were like legit on the tour.
Well, here, let's finish this ramp club thing before we jump into the Warped Tour. So
one thing about the ramp club, and if you want to edit this out, you let him know later. So here's just full circle, right in the ramp club, and he comes across a girl that I went to high school with.
Oh yeah.
And she was...
Well, yeah, well, Marky, the old school pro skater, who hated all BMXers pretty much except for me. That was her husband, right?
Was that the dude that was going to shoot me?
Yeah, that was the dude who was going to shoot you. Yeah.
Okay.
and so he lived under that ramp, and she started coming around, and that's how sort of that's eventually how.
Because you moved in with her.
Yeah, I moved in with her.
Because I remember we stayed.
She was a full-on stripper partier.
Yeah.
Worked at the club over here, and I haven't seen her since high school days.
Yeah.
But just to give you, like I said, you go to the ramp club late at night.
Well, here's my correlation, and I'm not trying. We all know you partied really hard. I mean, that was about to start where you went from a dude that was just smoking and drinking to you were partying hard.
I was partying. Yeah.
Yeah, you were up.
Yeah.
Because I remember we went down there once. It was like me and I think we were on our way to Oceanside to a BS contest in Oceanside. They all blend together, but it was a late night session, and I remember you were there. Kagy was there. Kagy was in his mini truck, and his girlfriend was breaking up with him, and he was crying. I love Chad. I'm not trying to throw him under the bus. It was a long time ago, and it was funny. And I remember we'd leave I wanted to go out with my car and do something, and it was so awkward. You're like, oh, God. And so we're in there riding. I remember going in, and you had 2 girls in there, and you guys were partying.
Yeah.
And you, hey, Shad. I'm like, no, I'm gonna go ride.
Yeah.
And then I remember Chad comes in, and he was so upset that night. He learned flares. He just started flinging flares on the quarter pipe after the box jump, and he landed one. It took him like 5 tries. His bike was,
Yeah.
But yeah, I just remember thinking like, this place is fucking loose, dude.
Yeah.
Like, there was like, you had those chicks there. You were getting loose. Chad's crying. I ended up with bug bites. It was wild. But yeah, and then that night, you're like, oh, we're going to stay. I'm staying with my girlfriend's, and we followed you and your caddy out. And I remember just scraping everything, leaving. And we get to the house, and you're like, okay, cool, guys. So just so you know, if you see someone like looking in the windows, or he's like, you're like, just sleep under the dining room table because her ex-boyfriend hates me and he might shoot up the house or something. And I was like, what? I remember being so freaked out, just like laying under the coffee table all night.
Yeah, it sounds pretty typical.
Sounds pretty on par.
Yeah. And the Ramp Club stayed for a while, and eventually the Ramp Club's demons got the best of it. You know what I mean? But it was definitely...
Well, a lot of the core dudes that were part of it kind of were sponsored and weren't being able to be there as much.
Brian Jackson lived there, then Brian Jackson left when Red was living there. And, it never made any money.
Yeah.
Right? It never made any money. And then it was like... There was a lot of liability, let's put it that way. There was a lot of liability in that place going on every day. It got pretty sketchy there at the end, but man, a lot of good times there.
So are you still entering contests at that point, or are you kind of falling back from contests and just touring a bunch?
Yeah, I mean, by that point, I'm sort of like going to some contests here and there. Like I remember I was doing like Burning Bike,
the
Ron's
2-hip ones.
Yeah, I did that, and I did really good there. You know what I mean? And I had gone to some contests. I was sort of a mess, right? And I went to
right around that time. Me and Cecil, we always go to the Ramp Club, and we always
Cecil Johns from
yeah.
Boss.
Yeah, and watch these guys ride. And there was a point in time where it was like, Nyquist was still learning a lot of stuff, but it's like Cam was the one that was just about better than everybody.
Yeah,
he was throwing big shit, and he had his own bag of shit.
I tried to ride different.
Yeah,
I tried to do stuff people weren't doing.
Exactly. And it really stood out. Like a lot of people were saying that, almost the point that Cam was probably one of the best riders in the Ram Club at that early era.
Yeah.
When shit got a little out of control.
Yeah.
When shit was out of control, you got to realize I was there all night riding.
I remember we filmed you, and you did it like first try, hit the box jump lip, aired into the vert ramp, bar spin, bank, soup.
I used to do that gap to grind.
Oh,
I used to do gap to bar to that gap.
Was really
to
far.
Grind. Yeah, and it was far. Yeah, it was, there was a lot. I always tried when I was that time, especially when in those era, it was like, I really wanted to do technical lip tricks, but I really wanted to do big, scary tricks that, like, my thought of, like, badass was not smooth. My thought of badass was just, like, something big and hairy and landing super sketchy, but pulling it.
Yeah.
Right?
You wanted people watching you be like
you know what I mean? Like a show, you know what I mean? So it was like, I was always thinking, like, what can I do that would be, like, just gnarly. I wanted to be known as more gnarly instead of, like...
Yeah.
Joey... I was in a guy, I'm in a group, and you got to remember, like, you sort of evolve around, like, you want to stick out. So I'm not going to try to ride smooth. I'm riding with Joey Garcia all the time, right? I'm not going to outsmooth Joey Garcia.
True.
Right? He's the smoothest guy.
And everything Joey did, it made it look so easy. That you can just go out there and do it.
Yeah.
Click,
the hardest thing.
high, everything like that.
Super
and,
dialed.
And Nyquist by that time was super technical and dialed. Right, super techy, right? Like all the bar spins, all those things. So it's like, you had to sort of do something to stand out. And for me, standing out was like, I wanted to be like, really. I thought being crazy burly, but then all of a sudden you do like a Canadian to bar in, or or some super technical lip trick, or like tail tap to nose to toot the bar, or something like that. People be like, well, what the fuck is that? Like, he just did like the sketchiest jump I've ever seen. It was badass, and then he went straight into some technical lip trick. But
early Cam Birdwell, like, technical tricks were like, I'm just X up wall rides,
Oh yeah.
You know, stuff like that. Except wall ride, trying to bar out
Well, you
of
did.
it.
You even
Yeah,
did
except rails.
Except rails.
except one hand. Except one hand wall ride.
Yeah,
Except one-handed wall ride.
Except rocket one-handed wall ride.
Yeah. Except crooked grind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a little bit later.
Yeah.
That came later. We can get to that later. But
So, when you went on tour with Warped Tour, because Warped Tour had been around for maybe a couple of years then,
yeah.
were you like freaking out? Like, oh shit, I get to go out with all these bands? Or
I mean.
or were you just partying too much to where.
I felt like, I mean, I toured every year. So it was very much, I'd been touring every year, getting bigger tours, doing more stuff. And then that Warped Tour was like, the last two Warped Tours, I mean, they were a lot of fun. You know what I mean? They were a lot of fun. And it always consisted of, and I wasn't one who could party and ride. That was not me, right?
You're not Dave Tom?
No, I couldn't party and ride. I could never do that because I can't really turn off the party switch, right? So it's like I could never ride and party. So, but what I do is we wake up, get our, recover from the night before, get some food in us, set up the box. We ride during the middle of the day at the shows. But then like 4 o'clock, once that show was over, it was like, put that box away. And it was on. It was like party machine. And we go back and we go to the, the bus or the RV. I take their passes and we go out and we just gather people. You know what I mean? I bring them back, with the passes and we get them back. And then, finally till we had a full RV or a full bus.
So you said the first year you went with Ron and the band, but the second year, because you said it was like Ron, you and Sager or something?
It was me, Ron's band, Sager, Sean Burnham.
Yeah.
And I believe the tour ended, and then I did another shop tour afterwards, and I think it was with different people.
Yeah. But I remember you saying the other day, he was like, oh, you guys are going to go back out, pick the riders you want. And
then the next year, he said, I need you.
Tell me why you picked the two you picked.
So the next year, I was on for it, but I was going on the tour through Jinko.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Because Jinko was big in BMX at that time.
Yeah, Jinko was big, and they wanted it, and they were sponsoring.
Because you were pro for Jinko, right?
Yeah, and they were sponsoring us.
It's weird Bruce didn't go almost.
Yeah,
Christman.
well, Ron had said, okay, you're going on through Jinko, this guy Ian Lashley, this and that. He goes, you need to pick. I need 2 guys that go on tour. Obviously, they need to do flips. That was like the one, because I didn't flip.
You didn't flip, did you?
I didn't flip.
That's crazy.
And I'll tell you that story in a minute. Me and Oscar were talking about it, why I didn't flip, and I've sort of, done a self-analysis, and I think I figured out why I didn't flip. But
yeah, talk about the 2 dudes you picked and why.
And so he goes, and basically the only prerequisite was that they had to flip, and at that time, I was like, oh, okay, well, Dave Tom, right?
Why'd you pick Dave?
Well, Dave Tom, I knew, like, as hard as I partied, like, Dave Tom was still pretty much going to out-party me. And so, I wouldn't look like such a degenerate. I would look like, I wouldn't look so bad.
And Dave could kill it, too.
And Dave could kill it, right? And he could flip. And, obviously you guys have been come down. I'd become friends with Dave over the years. And I knew he shredded. I was in all the same videos. I knew he was really, really good. Yeah. Right? Really good. I always remember, seeing Dave when he would do decades. And had whip sound, and those were hard tricks. I've still never done a decade.
Yeah, he's had those things for...
Never done a decade.
Yeah.
And I remember it took me a long time to learn tail whips, and I remember he used to just throw whips on everything.
Yeah.
But I picked him, and then I picked a guy, Dave Stevenson.
Death
Ride Dave.
And Dave's from the LA area, right?
Well, he's from Sacramento.
Oh, is he from Sacramento?
Yeah, he's from Sacramento, and then he may have been in LA before that. When I met him in Sacramento, I went to some trails in Sacramento to ride with all those guys.
And he's just...
And he pulled up, and he was just in shorts, and I had never seen him, but he was burly looking, right?
Oh, he was so burly.
So burly, and he went in front of me to ride, and he had a gun put in the back of his shorts.
He had a gun back there.
Yeah, sticking out of his shorts, and he was busting these airs, and at that time, I was trying to be hardcore, and I was just like, instantly was like, this guy's like my hero.
So he's jumping through the trails with...
He's just sessioning with us with a gun and stuffed in the back. It wasn't like he had a gun holster. I mean, this thing was just stuffed into the back of his shorts. And he's just like chilling, talking with us or whatever.
Which is weird because he's like the nicest guy.
Oh, he's super nice. But that's who I picked him, right? So I got 2 Daves. Right? One to make me look good and one to protect me against all my dumb shit, because no one would mess with Dave Stevenson, right? No, I could walk around and just bump into everybody and just be totally out of control. And Dave would be with me, and Dave always kind of had his wits about him, right? And he didn't
really party super hard, did he?
He partied, but he was always super chill, right?
Yeah.
But like, you didn't cross him. Like,
Yeah.
you saw the dude, and so I felt like, I'm like, all right, obviously selfish Cam. I'm like, all right, here we go. I'm going to be good now. Got someone to make me look good. Got someone to protect me. Like, this summer's on. And we had a blast. I mean, we traveled all summer long, and we raged, and we had, we were all over the place, and we would just get into...
I mean, that was Warped Tour at its, like, peak.
Oh, it is peak. And, we were on with Rancid and Pennywise and, Bad Religion and...
were you hanging out with the bands and stuff?
Oh, yeah. A lot with, who was Fred Durst, the singer of, I can't think of it.
I know.
Did It All for the Nookie,
what is that band?
Why can't I think of it? They're long gone now.
Yeah,
but,
that rap rock band.
Yeah, rap rock, but they were huge at the time. Yeah. And so on their bus all the time, they used to, pay me in product to, roll their green cigarettes up, to roll their joints, right? So I would go on there at night, and they'd throw it on the table, and I'd roll it all for them, and they'd give it to me. But, we knew all the truck drivers. We raged. It was so much fun. And then towards the last, 10 days of the tour, maybe there was, 2 weeks left, right around there, at night, another truck would tow we were in a bus, right? And they would tow the box jump. In the middle of the night, the box fell apart or whatever, but they had to leave it. The tour drives in the middle of the night all night long.
Yeah.
And so they left the box, and we didn't have anything to ride at that point, right? And
so you're just on tour.
We're just on tour, right? And Warped Tour, they would always, every morning, all the buses, they would put a huge case of beer, 2 cases of beer, 2 30-packs.
It just seems like trouble.
It does. Well, I mean...
With the group of people.
With ours, it was trouble, right? But with the box shop, we kept it together to do our shows, right?
Yeah.
We actually weren't... I mean, we'd rage when everyone else started raging, right? Yeah. But once the box broke, the raging just started.
It was 10 days of non.
It was right when we woke up.
Yeah.
Right, we would go, and I remember it was getting really hairy, and we were. It was getting wild, right? It was getting wild where
Were you leaving the show, cruising cities and stuff?
We would always leave the show. Usually, I had something back then. I'm a big Taco Bell fan, so I would always leave the. I would always leave. I've eaten Taco Bell in every state but Alaska, right? And so I would always leave to go look for like I was getting some new cuisine or something. But I just had to eat Taco Bell in every state, so I'd always leave and go try to find Taco Bells, right? That was my
thing. And you'd bring one of the Daves with you, probably.
Always bring one of the Daves with me, right?
And there were stories of Cam on Warped Tour and getting kicked off the tour.
Oh no, that's what I'm saying. I'm going to tell this story. I'm going to tell this
back in to someone else.
Oh, that was with Ron's show. That's one. So one time, and Ron has the footage, and we're going to find it, right?
Oh,
and I'm up there at one of the Cellophane Solutions, out of control, right? I'm out of control. I'm at the Cellophane Solution show, and that was his band.
Yeah.
And I'm going berserk up at the stage, right? And if they kick me off, they drag me out, and I'm fighting and doing all this stuff, and they go and they throw me off the tour, right? But it's just like a security guard for that location, right?
Yeah.
So I go back around, I get back in the tour, because I'm on the tour, right? And then he has footage of me, and I go back in, and I got my badge. I go, I'm on the tour, you can't do shit to me. And I'm in this guy's face. Ozzy, when they had one tour where Warped Tour and Ozfest met.
Oh, wow.
And I wish I saw the shirt. They gave everyone on the tour a shirt, and it said "We're skating meet Satan," right? And it was right, and it was where they combined the tours. It was this massive show, right? It was just like this huge show. Ozfest, Warped Tour met together. It was just huge, right?
Yeah.
And I'm backstage still, even though it's Ozfest too, right? And so I remember I'm going to be on stage at Ozzy, right? I'm going to be on stage at Ozzy. So we're up there. We go and, Ozzy gets driven in, he gets up on the stage, and I'm up on the stage.
And he was still kind of walking around, and he's pretty normal.
Yeah, pretty normal. He gets up there, and he starts his concert, and I just remember, and I was already pretty loose, and I'm just I'm just going to go out and just start headbanging right in the middle of the stage. So, middle of his set, I, go out and think, I'm just yeah, going on, and they drag me off the show for that one. They kick me. I got back on after that one, but the last one was when the box jump broke.
Yeah.
And we were just kind of out of control.
And is both Daves with you, or is it just Dave?
No. So this is what happened. Both Daves are still there. And on the same night, right, I don't know what it led up to, and I'm sure there's a big story leading up to it. I don't remember, right? All I know is that Death Ride Dave
Stevenson,
got arrested for indecent exposure.
Okay.
Right? And I think he was peeing on something or doing something. He got arrested, so he wasn't even up, but I didn't know. So he was already, and he got held back in that town. So we left.
Weren't you guys down by Louisiana or something?
We were on the East Coast, up around North Carolina-ish area, somewhere in that area. And so Dave Stevenson's off, and I don't know. pretty much.
Because you're partying.
That was gonzo that night.
Partying with
let's just say this. I'm recalling these events from third-party sources.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, and what eventually happened is, I don't really remember much. I do remember at the end, they pulled over all of the buses. It's like 30 or 40 buses. They pulled them all over on some desolate highway in the middle of the night.
For you.
Yeah, and the owner of Kevin Lyman, the head of the tour, and all his goons came on, and they just dragged me off. Apparently, I was messing with everybody, fighting with everybody, and eventually I did something to the bus driver, and that was like the last straw.
Yeah.
And they came on there, and they dragged me off there with all my stuff, and I remember I was just still defiant. You know what I mean? I was going off, and I'm like, no, and I'm like, the only thing I was carrying with me was my beer bong. I was just trying to fight for my beer bong, and they dragged me off all my stuff. My bike was on some other bus. I didn't have my bike.
Yeah.
But all my stuff, and they just boom. And Kevin Lyman handed me $200. He goes, "Good luck." And
you were underage still.
Oh yeah.
You were 17, weren't you?
No, I was, I think, 19.
Oh, okay.
18 or 19.
When Dave's told he's he's underage. They're just dropping him off.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was 18,
okay,
at least. And so they put me on the side of the road. This is the middle of nowhere.
And didn't Dave just go, I guess I'm with you?
No, Dave stayed on.
Dave stayed on?
Yeah, I was on my own. In the middle
I
of
thought Dave left with you.
No. And so at that point now, one night, 2 BMXers are gone, right? And so I just remember just dragging my stuff. It was too much stuff to carry on me. I'm dragging my stuff down this desolate. I have no idea where I am.
Yeah.
Right? No idea.
Are you wasted?
Oh, wasted, right? And I finally walk into a gas station, and I get in this gas station. I'm just out of it. And it's in the middle of the night, and I remember this car pulled in. This guy, and I had no idea. Right? There's no phones. There's no anything. So you're just sort of winging it. And I told this guy, I'm like, listen, I had $200. I go, I'll give you $100 to get me to an airport, right? $100. And he goes, all right, well, stay here. So he leaves, and then I don't know how much time goes by, but he comes back. I remember it was a Trans Am or something that was beefed up.
Of course it was.
Right? And he comes, he gets me, I give him $100 again, and I remember it wasn't very far before we were at the airport, right? It wasn't very far. I remember thinking, I totally just wasted $100. That was a lot back there. I just totally wasted $100. But I get out of the airport, I'm sick all night long, right? I wake up in the morning.
Just coming down.
Oh, yeah. I wake up in the morning and I call Ron. Ron's pissed, right? He goes, Dave's in jail and, you got kicked off. You're making me look bad. Jinko's pissed, all this stuff. And I'm like, Ron, just fly me home. Because I was supposed to start a shop tour at the end of the Warped Tour.
Yeah.
I go, just fly me home and I'll drive out. He goes, no, I'm not flying you home. And so he goes, take a cab to... he goes, I by that point I had spent some money on everything, but I needed to take a cab to Greyhound.
Oh, he's like, well, I'll pay.
No, we figured it out, and basically he said, you have enough money, a little bit of money for food, use what you have left to take a cab to Western Union, and then take the cab to the Greyhound station. And then I did those things, and he wired me some money. I got a ticket, and then I took a bus from, North Carolina to Texas. I took the Greyhound. And
were you sick the whole time?
No, I was okay then, and it was just a miserable. I had almost no money. I spent whatever money I had on cigarettes or alcohol or whatever. I had no money, and I got there and I stayed in some shoddy motel, and until the shop tour started, and then the last day of the show, I got back to the Warped Tour because that's where we were supposed to meet. We're the last stop of the Warped Tour. And some guy had my bike, seat all raised, the handlebars all moved, trying to claim my bike. I'm like, that's my bike, dude. And he's just
I was about to ask you if you got your bike.
I got my bike.
And so was Dave Tom there, like, hey, buddy.
Yeah. And I honestly, I don't think Dave Tom went on the shop tour with me. I think it was a different team.
Oh, really?
I think it was 2 hip riders. And I don't remember, to be honest, I can't remember who exactly what it was. I'd say probably the funnest guy I ever toured with. And I really looked up to him when I toured with him. And I had a lot of fun. And I still think he's an amazing rider. Don Mock.
Oh, I love Dom. So he was on 2 hip for a minute.
Yes. And I remember seeing Dom at the end of one of my summers shows. I remember seeing him double whip.
Oh, he did double whips.
Yeah.
I remember seeing him do a double whip in 96, 95.
Yeah, and he double whipped the 2 hip box, and I remember just going wow, no one did double.
I forgot he rode for 2 hip before McNeil, huh?
Yeah, and he was fun to tour with.
Dude, first time I met Dom was 94. I just graduated high school. We went to this contest up in Canada.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm from this little redneck town, and we show up, and all these Canadians, they are just on a whole nother level.
Yeah.
That contest, I got to see Davis Otto on a Kuahara Bravo, or Magician, do a Canadian full bar spin on a 8-foot quarter on a Kuahara. Like, this is like beginning of summer '94. I'm like, that, you know, somebody did a Canadian on that quarter pipe. I'd have lost my mind, let alone bar spinning. Dom almost front flips the box jump.
Yep.
You know, it was just like my mind was being blown. And he's like, you know, sometimes I think people, especially when he got on McNeil, the world didn't really know about Dom Mock. And he came out, by the time he was on McNeil, Dom was very beaten up.
Yeah.
So people hadn't seen him how spry.
He was
like,
gnarly.
And he was still so consistent. People didn't realize, like the knack seat grab inward bar spin. I've never seen somebody do that. And the nicest dude.
Yeah.
I think one of the most underrated riders ever for the stuff he pushed.
Yep. He was badass.
He was so badass.
And again, remember, it was my type of style, right?
Oh,
big and burly, but could do technical lip tricks. And so
he's right up your alley.
Right up my alley, man. And so I was just like a huge fan of him when I toured with him, and I was just like, I really looked up to Dom a lot when I toured with him. He was like, you know, he's a couple years older than me.
He's him and I are about the same age. So
he's a few years older than me, and he was super burly, and you know, like the don't give a fuck style, like would go for anything, but then could bust like some technical shit that no one else could do. And I was
tail
like,
up nose pick a sub box,
that's what I like my riding to be, and you know, he probably had a lot of influence on how I tried to ride. You know what I mean? So he was probably one of the funnest guys I toured with,
and an early infection dude.
Yep.
You know, so. Yep. You know,
and he had another video, I can't remember the name, that was straight out of Canada. One of his
I'm about to put it online. It's it's like the Legend of Zelda cover.
Yes.
Yeah, it's gold.
But there was another guy he rode with, like
Simon.
Yes, and they rode all together, and there was like a little outdoor mini that they rode.
Simon Berry, Simon was sick too. Yeah. Those were my homies from like when I first like when I first started going to Canada. Those were the dudes we'd always link up with.
Yep. And so I got that video from Mutt and copied it. So I knew of Dom. You know, well before, you know...
I mean, Dom was riding pro level early 90s.
He was doing some badass stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. The Legend of Zelda cover, exactly.
Yeah, I forgot what it's called, but it's gold. It's spray-painted gold. I pulled it out the other day. I'm like, I got to put this on the Snakebite channel because no one's seen it, and it's super good.
Yeah.
So, you've done the touring thing. You weren't even doing the contest. You were barely in magazines at that time, kind of, weren't you? Like...
Yeah, I started getting in magazines. I mean, when I was on 2Up, I think my first one was like an ad, and then I got a picture on my parents' box jump doing Superman. Was like on the Black Stout Boy, and that was my first like non-ad picture. And then right around there, I started getting some more pictures, mostly Superman stuff. Yeah, that was sort of what I started becoming known.
I remember a lot of the pictures I think people talk about is the one-hand X-up wall ride where you're up at the ceiling.
Yeah, now that was later.
Yeah,
that was later because that I think when
you were brakeless then too.
Yeah, that was like 2003.
Okay.
Right, that was when. Remember, I was telling you I went to do the transit part.
Yeah.
Right, I was sort of in my underground era. Right, I sort of went.
Well, that's why I was saying it's kind of after the two hip. The
tours ended in 2000, and 99 was the last year I toured for Two.
And you kind of disappeared because
I went underground
because you were just
I was partying,
getting in a little bit of trouble,
and partying, and I went underground. 2000, 2001, 2000.
Do you want to talk about that era? Like what was going on?
I was just I was partying really hard, and I just I made some bad decisions. And essentially, I was in no state to really focus on riding and to make it. Okay, so here's a good example. One of the last times I really tried was I went to, I think it was Virginia. I went to Virginia to the BS. Right,
that's where that photo was taken.
No.
Wasn't that East Coast? That was.
Yeah, that was that. But this is like late 90s. This is like late 90s, like 98 or 99. I think probably 98, 99. So this is after I moved to San Jose when I was partying really hard. So put it this way. I flew out there, right? And I got to that contest. I put my bike together. And I ended up staying in the hotel room for a week. I didn't even go to the contest.
Wow.
I didn't even make it to the contest, right? I didn't even go to the contest. I stayed in the hotel room for a week.
You just found somebody that...
No, I was sleeping. I was out of it, right? I was out of it. I was sleeping. I was in no shape or form to go to a contest. By the time the contest was well over, I had no idea what was going on. I was like, I got to get home. I had no money, right? And so I called a cab because I'm like, I can't miss my flight. It was like the one thing I knew, like, I can't miss my flight home, right? And so the cab came. I didn't even say anything, right? I didn't even say anything. And like, they put my bike in. Couldn't even take my bike apart or anything, right?
You're just so tired.
I'm just
and
like,
sick.
just get me to the airport. And I remember I get there to the airport, and I was like, dude, I got some bad news. And the cab driver he's like, well, what is it? And I'm like, I got no money, man. And he's like, what? And I go, I got no money at all. And I'm like, but I had like a pendant, and it was a Susan B. Anthony dollar and like a pendant. I have no idea if it was valuable or not. I'm like, this is all I got. It's yours. I go, I'm sorry, man. I go, I just had to get here. He's like, oh, and I don't even remember really. I know I got all my stuff out. I walk in, I wheel my bike in, right? I wheel my bike in, and they're like, it's going to be $50 because my bike's rolled in, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, it was $50 if you wanted to.
You could roll a bike in at
for
that
$50,
time. Yeah.
right? $50 extra was the thing, and I didn't have $50, right? Or any sort of credit or debit card or anything like that. I had nothing, right? And he goes, you can't bring that bike in. So I'm like, I'm getting ready to just leave my bike, right? Whatever. I'll leave the bike. And there's some guys walk off, and they had like a BMX shirt. Somehow I knew they were BMX dropping someone off. I'm like, hey, are you guys going? And the next one was like in Florida, right? It was either I was in I was either in Florida. Yeah, I was. And the next one was in Florida. And so I go, are you going to be in Florida at the next contest, which was like a month away, some month and a half away? I'm like, yeah, we'll be there. Like, Cameron Birdwell, yeah, we'll be there. And I go, can you bring my bike, right? And they're like, yeah, we can bring your bike. So I just handed my bike off to them. I'm like, all right. And I go to get on the plane, and I don't even have ID. I don't know why I didn't have ID, but they're like, well, do you have ID? And I'm like, I don't have ID. And they're like, well, you can't really get on. That's when I flashed, the Birdwell, right? I flashed the Birdwell on the stomach, right? The tattoo. And they're like, I'm like, do you really think I get this tattooed on my stomach to get a free plane flight? I'm like, no, I wouldn't. And they're like, all right. So they let me on the plane. I got home. I skated at the ramp club for a month and a half. Didn't even touch a bike, right? Flew out to this other contest. I still am clueless. I don't even know who these guys are. I don't have their number. Nothing,
You're
right?
just hoping to see somebody.
Yeah,
You're hoping somebody walks up to you and be like, Cam, got your bike.
Yeah, I go to the contest, and I go to the sign-up booth, and sure enough, they like walk up with my bike. They're like, hey, Cam, they got my bike all dialed in. I'm like, oh, thanks, guys, right? So that contest was also pretty much a train wreck, a little bit better, but pretty much still a train wreck of a contest. I just couldn't be on practice on time. My bike was falling apart. I didn't have the tools to fix it.
The kind of state that you
I just was in a mess. I couldn't get anything together in time. It's like, I remember that contest, like, my bike was barely rolling.
Well, how much was, at that point in your life, where BMX went on the priority level?
Oh, it was way down.
Like, and I know this from my brother, kind of,
Yeah.
In your head, you still think it's at the highest point.
Yes.
But your actions have put it down to like 20th place.
Oh, it's way down, right? And at that point, like, you've got other priorities, right? And those priorities come way before. And if those aren't met, the BMX is off the table, right?
Yeah.
So, and that Florida wasn't that good that good either. And I remember like that, that contest ended pretty bad as well. I ended up staying in Hoffman's room, right? He left, and he had the room for another night, and Gons was like, you could stay in here. And put it this way, and we're ordering room service. Sorry, Hoffman, I'll pay you back for that. We're ordering room service.
You and Gons.
Oh, me and Gons and Sean Burnham. We're ordering rooms. We're eating pancakes, or we're all eating. And then like they call back, and like they knew or something. I couldn't remember, but they called the room, and we answered, and you could just tell that they knew. So we bounced out, and I had a flat tire, so we skirted out of the room real quick. And long story short, I ended up in some in a public restroom with Gons and Sean Burnham partying for like multiple hours. and then I made it home. But that was pretty much how the contest went, right? And that was sort of like, it was just pointless. And then I got off Ron to ride for Redline.
Yeah, you were telling me about that, which I don't think a lot of people know. You left Two Hip to ride for Redline.
Yeah, in the end of '99, I left Two Hip to ride, Redline. Todd Lyons, and
Todd
Lyons was an integral part. No, not Todd Lyons. Super G. Super G. It was Todd Lyons and Super G. I can't. No, Todd Lyons was my hookup at Jinko.
Yeah. Todd Lyons
and Super G sort of got the red line thing in place.
Yeah.
And they sent me a rough draft of a contract, and it was like, you know, starting in 2000, I was the pro dirt, pro street, you know, salaried, photo contingencies, contest contingencies, the full package, right?
Yeah.
Salary money, and it was great at the time. You know, it was like a full package, right? It's 17 contests,
enough to pay rent and live,
everything. Yeah, I'm way better than what it was like it was like a real job. And at that time, I mean, I was partying really hard, and I knew like.
Were you talking to Ryan or any of those guys then? Or
No, they were already sort of on their own track. You know, by then, you know, me and Ryan mentally were in separate universes, right?
Like you were friends, but
yeah, I mean, we grew up riding together, right?
Yeah.
Our roots are there, so it's like one of those things that like outside of the bike, we were as far opposite spectrum as you could get. I was just, you know, I thought I was punk rock, you know, really I was just an idiot. But so, you know, they sent me the rough draft of the contract. I said, you know, fuck yes, send me the contract. And at that time, I thought, you know, I'm just gonna go on like one last party bender and just go for it. And you know, after
so you said you were gonna do that and then be clean for this.
Then clean up my act and really go for it, right? So, but you know, I thought if this is gonna, you know, my going away from my party, I'm just gonna go as hard as I can. And you know, I went too hard. You know what I mean? I went too hard, and then which ended up in me, you know, sort of, you know, taking a hiatus. Let's put it that way. I took a little bit of a hiatus.
So you were supposed to sign the contract in 10 days.
Yeah, and you know, and I never, I for a long time, years later, I burned the contract. I got the contract in the mail, but by the time I was able to get to the contract, it was months and months and months later, and they had already signed.
So your bender went from 10 days to months, and you just kind of spaced or prioritized the state of mind you were in. You pushed it down.
Yeah, let's say. I mean, I got in some trouble, right? But by the time I had gotten in trouble, I had already racked up like speeding ticket warrants and no insurance warrants, and you know, just being stupid. I was driving down to a contest in LA in Ron's van, and I got pulled over on the Grapevine, and there was no insurance on the van, and I was speeding, and you know, and I got this big ticket, and then I got a big court date, which I flaked on the court date, and then you know that turned into like you know a warrant, and then I got driving on suspended, and that turned into a bigger thing, and you know. And
yeah,
so,
just the typical things, like when you're in that state of mind.
I didn't care.
I think most people don't, you know, if somebody has a friend or a family member.
Yeah.
Like, I've known you your whole life.
Yeah.
Even when you were messed up, you were still Cam.
Yeah.
You know, you're still a sweet guy.
Yeah.
You're making bad choices. Most time when people get pulled into the system like that, it's not for like, oh, I Grand Theft Auto or something violent. It's a tic-tac effect of like, oh, you skip this and this and this.
Yeah.
And those things just turn from an anthill to
Yep.
A mountain.
Yep.
And then that's what you get pulled into that system.
Yep.
And you never can pull yourself out because you're not in the right state of mind.
No, and I got in a little bit of trouble, and I was in a court, and they were going to let me, you know, they were going to let me out. They, you know, my best friend Squirrel, you know, love him to death.
Squirrel's a good dude.
Yeah, he showed up and like showed the judge, like, look, this guy's doing this guy has like a really bright future.
He has opportunities.
Yes, and well, I knew because my first name's Jay.
Yeah.
My name's Jay Cameron, and the judge was calling me Jay. And then I went into a court date, and they said Cameron Birdwell, and I was like, that's weird. You know what I mean? And then he said, hey, I understand you got all these things going on. Like, we're going to let you go and deal with your stuff, right? It wasn't that bad. It was minor, pretty much minor offense. But the warrant in LA for all these driving things had like, it was like $50,000, right? So they wanted $5,000, which was way more than I had, right? And I sort of wasn't talking to my parents at that time and didn't have. He goes, but you have to pay this warrant. They won't let us let you out until you pay this warrant. Otherwise, you have to like stay here, you know, for a while, and then they're going to come and get you and bring you down there. And so I ended up getting stuck because of that. All those driving.
You were in jail for a while.
I got stuck, for this thing because I didn't have this $5,000 to pay off this warrant. And so by the time I, you know, got it together and dealt with all that stuff, you know, minor stuff, but you know, once I got it all dealt with and got out, it was too late.
Yeah.
Strebe was on red line. You know, and at that point I was, you know, pretty ashamed at that point, right? Like, you know, you're kind of like, I think most people in the industry knew, like a lot of people that had, you know, that were at least close. It was sort of like I was, you know, you were taking a gamble, you know, if you were going to like sponsor me or something like that. I was pretty unpredictable.
I know a few of us like would talk about you, and you know, everybody was concerned about you at that time. You know.
Yeah. And so I didn't really know how to deal with it. So, I went MIA again for a few years, right? I went MIA again for a few years underground and just sort of didn't... I rode all the time, but I couldn't look at BMX stuff, magazines or stuff, because, you know, you're
you were saying, like, when you went in the store and saw a cover with Ryan.
Yeah, and you know, you're thinking, like, it really hits you of, like, how bad the choices you've made are really bad, right? Yeah. You know, it's a very stark indicator of the bad choices you've made have led you to here. Whereas here's what it would have looked like if you probably would have made some good choices, right?
And they're just minor choices.
Well, I mean, they were pretty major, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I was partying hard like that, it was my persona.
Well, I've been saying like minor, like, hey, if I just didn't start drinking or do just a couple little turns.
I mean, you know, like they say, the age-old thing, if I knew then what I know now, I mean, it would be a whole different story, right? So, but, you know, that's when, and then a few years went by, but I was still writing all the time, but I was...
Well, that's kind of what you brought up earlier, that video part you filmed for, what was the video?
It's called Transit, Transit Video Magazine. Yeah, and that was, I met Barry Page, who made that. He owned Triple X Sports in Nashville.
That part came out like 2004 or something?
That was like 2003.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was riding the blue pork with no brakes.
The chromoly pork.
Yeah, the chromoly pork. I had no brakes. I was sort of like but I was riding all street at the time.
Yeah.
And I would ride a little bit of ramps, like the Vans Park I would go out to. And
just a comment on that era that Cam was talking about. You know, he's seeing Nyquist on a cover shot and feeling what he's feeling. Me being... at that point, you know, just a fan of the sport and knowing these guys, like, we all thought that, you know, Nyquist was going to be awesome, but we all thought at that one portion of time that he was the one that was better than everybody. He was the one that was going to, you know,
I mean,
take it to that level.
You know, I mean, then that's how I always, you know, growing up, like, you know, me and Nyquist were always neck and neck. You know what I mean? We had different styles or whatever. We were sort of pretty opposite. You know, he obviously made a lot of good decisions, but, you know, we were, you know, it was... You know, I felt like it was my calling, right? And then, you know, I guess just over time, you know, people came to expect me to, like, put on a show off the bike. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, it became this thing where my persona was, like, shock him on the bike and then, like...
Shock him even more off.
Shock him more off the bike. Like, this dude is just, like... You know, I thought it was, like, you know, this enigma. You don't really think about, like, what happens when this all goes haywire, right? You don't really think about that. But... For Transit, you know, I met Barry on tour, and he's a great guy, and, you know, he offered to help me out. And he said, why don't we film a part? You come out here, stay with me for a few weeks. You can work at the shop.
And he lived out in Nashville?
In Nashville. He had the Triple X Park, and so...
Oh, that's where the one-hand X-Up was, at the Triple X Park.
Yep, and I believe Frymouth took the picture.
You're right, Frymouth took it, and you did a one-hand X wall ride.
Never done it before.
Frymouth was probably just there on a session, and you showed up?
Yeah, I was doing, I was there. And they came by for something, and
he was probably like, "What the fuck is Cam?"
Yeah,
doing
well,
here?
I mean, a lot of times it was like, you know, when the camera came out, I'll try.
Yeah.
Especially back then, you know, I would try pretty much anything, and so I was doing X-Up wall rides at that time,
which is still so gnarly.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm just gonna do a one-handed X-Up, but I tried like 2 or 3 crowds, but then I just pulled it. And so, and then on the other side, we could do top side double pegs.
Yeah.
On the other side of the bowl, and I did the X-Up top side double peg in the rafter, which was crazy, and that's in the end of the Transit part.
We may have to find that Transit part online and post it with the podcaster.
Yeah.
If not, hit him up and try to.
Yeah, they keep taking it off because of the song.
Okay.
Right. I have the. Can you convert VHS?
Yeah.
I'll send you. I have a couple copies.
I can always post it on Vimeo, and they won't drop it, and I can post it on Vimeo, and we can post it up.
Okay. Yeah, at the end of that, I do the top side double peg. But I filmed half of the part in Nashville, you know, came back, and I'm still screwed up partying, right? But I was still riding really good, and, you know, when it was on my own terms and I was under pressure, I could shred on street. I was riding all street.
You did, and that part, like, you did some really big handrails.
Yeah,
you did
a lot of crooked grinds.
You did a few ramp things, and you did the X-Up crooked grind.
X-Up crooked grind. A lot of just regular crooked grinds.
Yeah.
Ice pick grinds down a rail. I do a hop over ice pick grind down a rail. a lot of X-Up stuff. So, you know, that was, and he asked me, and I said, I want to film, he goes, come out to Triple X and we'll film, you know, thinking I'm going to ride the rants. I go, all right, but I want to film a street part.
Yeah.
Like, I want to do streets, like street? And I'm like, yeah, like street. So that's sort of how you know, and that was the thing, is that in that era, I thought, you know, again, sort of partying really hard, I would just be MIA for months on end, and then there'd be a big session, and I would just show up like a Meet the Street and just sort of go off. You know what I mean?
No, I saw you.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't seem that healthy when I saw you at that Meet the Street.
No, I wasn't.
But you were riding, and, you know,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, because I hadn't seen you, I felt, for like 8 years then or something.
Yeah, and I would just sort of show up out of nowhere and shred and then disappear into the night, and I thought that was like, ooh, I'll be like the infamous. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I think you did good at it. You felt infamous.
Yeah, like.
But I think it almost sometimes to people who were friends with you.
Well, the people who really knew me, they were, you know, obviously.
I think a lot of us, it was a sigh of, and I'm not as close to you as Ryan and stuff, but I've known you for a long time. Like when I saw you there, you were infamous.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but it kind of was. You had a sigh of relief, seeing you and being like, okay, you know, and you could have a little FaceTime with you, to check in on you, you know.
Yeah, and you know, and I think a lot of people, especially people really close, you know, it was a lot of wasted potential. It was more of, it wasn't so much infamous. It was like, that's a sad story. You know what I mean? Like, he really could have been something special, and he really sort of blew it. And I think that's what most of the people I grew up with thought, right? Yeah. And so I stayed away because I could feel that when I would see him.
And that doesn't...
It's a terrible feeling.
It's a hard thing to face.
It's a very hard thing to face. And you know, and eventually over time, you know, you know, I was getting sort of nowhere in life, and, you know, I made a decision and sort of, you know, turned everything around.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's a big deal, because I don't remember when I first saw you again when you were clean and like sober, but I was like, oh, whoa, this is big. And I remember I started seeing snippets of you riding again, but it wasn't
in that era where I
about what year was that where you started trying to be clean and so not
2006.
Okay.
In that era when he's talking about like showing up to the San Francisco Meet the Street nowhere, and I wasn't riding much that then and there, but just here and there. But when I finally got a call from Squirrel to say, hey, I got the fucking mini ramp at a warehouse and I can't do nothing with it, like that, like it was just gonna, who knows what would happen to it. And I took the initiative he moved it from Solid to Morgan Hill, and I borrowed a buddy's truck and a trailer where I went out there and I grabbed the mini and I threw it in the backyard, and when I built it, it kind of like got everybody back together.
I did see you
and,
stuff that you ride.
I didn't really see Cam that much at all for literally a lot of years, a lot of people.
Yeah.
And when I got this portion of the mini back together, I mean, it kind of like brought a lot of people back, and it you know, we had a lot of good sessions back here. And,
and then and
I think that was the early stage of him really fucking turning everything.
Yeah, and you know, it came to a point, you know, they have a word for us, a moment of clarity, right? I just sort of looked at myself, and I just thought, I got to just change. You know, I mean, this is not...
What was the most rock bottom thing if you...
I was in trouble again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in trouble again, and I had just dug my hole with... as far as everything you could dig a hole with, right?
Yeah.
Credit and I had nothing, right? And it was just a very, you know, there was no more persona to live up to. It was just a sad state of being, and you know, I just had a moment of clarity. And I thought, that's it. I can't live like this anymore, and you know, and I changed then, and you know, and at that time, to me at that point, you know, it was like 2006, later half of 2006, and you know, looking back, it wasn't too far. I mean, 5, 6, 7 years out of, you know, the heyday. It still felt too far for me to try to come back and do that. And so I thought that's not really.
So when you started getting clean, you're like, I'm not going to try to be a pro BMXer.
No, I wasn't. I was like 27, 20, you know, and you know, and by that point, I had sort of made up my mind. I'd blown that, right?
Did you? With all this, have you had like any? I mean, was your body beaten up, or is it more beaten up from partying?
No, I mean my body wasn't really that bad.
Okay.
To be honest, you know,
which is insane.
I did all of that riding. I mean, I've had a lot of injuries. They all came way after that period.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of them came after I turned 30. Right, they all came after that. Back then, I was, I don't know if it's riding, feeling, I mean, being young obviously is one part, but obviously just not being scared of falling, I think plays a huge part in not getting hurt. Like, if you're just not fearless, just go for everything and just, I just never got hurt. So, I thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I was vaguely good at computers, and I thought, well, I guess I'll go to school for that, and that's what started me.
When you started getting clean and sober, were you like reconnecting with your parents and stuff?
Oh yeah, I stared and reconnecting, building, repairing bridges I had.
Because I think it's good to talk about it, because there might be somebody listening.
Well, I mean, here's one of the most things, and I'm so lucky, is that as soon as I cleared up a bit, I had a whole community of BMX people that, you know what I mean, I could immediately jump back into.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, boom, I was right back into the crowd I've always been with. You know what I mean? So
and they were there just open arms.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, they were there open arms. And a lot of them were there through a lot of the stuff too. It wasn't like I lost contact, but like really able to go ride with people all the time and being around. Squirrel was there, and everybody, and it's just all the people I'd grown up with, were sort of there, and that was it. And I sort of just started just rebuilding and still riding. I still ride.
Yeah. But you went to school and
then got into IT and just sort of moved up that sort of ladder of
which is like probably a whole new world.
I mean, BMX helps a lot in that. I got when people want to know what I did for a long period of time, and I say pro BMX, it's a very interesting thing, and people like, whoa, really? Like, what was that like? And it actually helps a lot, to be able to do that. And they go, really? And then they'll look up your name, and then they'll see you jump in something, or do a jump in Mega, or you know what I mean, or doing something crazy.
And that's what I think that's killer. I'm not saying it was a comeback, but Cam regrouping his life and then just really getting the love back for riding. I mean, look what he did in the last handful of years. I mean, the guy almost pulled fucking 10.
No, I mean,
the guy did a Superman peg rev over the fucking Mega. I mean, it's just it's just awesome.
Oh, I've seen it.
Yeah. So it was, and it wasn't like, it was more just to like sort of push myself,
Well, because you've always loved riding.
I've always loved riding, and and by the time I came back, like, foam pits were there, because I kind of fell out in the era right before foam pits.
Yeah.
And a lot of people learned, so you got to remember that I kind of fell off right when foam pits were starting. And so when, then you got to think, when I'm sort of coming back to in 2006, like, people are doing crazy shit, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like,
and you hadn't really paid attention to BMX.
No, and I'm thinking, this is like insane, right? And sure enough, as soon as I got to foam pits, like, I started learning all the stuff I'd never learned before. I'm doing double whips and double whip threes and flips, and and I learned a whole bevy.
That is funny, because for some reason in my head I pictured you doing 3 whips before you got in trouble.
Nope.
And that's all after.
I did whips.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did whips first. It took me a long time to learn whips, and I started doing big tail whips first.
And big sevens, like I'm like the old Cameron Ram Club. I don't remember a lot of people throwing.
No,
sevens.
we didn't. I had done a few sevens at Cali.
I was the only people I was really like throwing fucking sevens.
Yeah.
But
and as soon as foam pits came back and all that, like, I learned, it just was so nice to like learn all of these tricks. Yeah, foam pits, and then resi, and then obviously Mega was like, Mega back in the 90s would have been like right up my alley. Just a huge roll into a jump. Like, that's always what I was looking for to contests anyways, right? Was a huge roll into a huge jump. That's all I really wanted in the end. So it's like, I really wish that would have came, a little earlier, because I would have been so into Mega, and in my heyday, it would have been just like perfect.
You would have been, I feel like you're kind of built off that same grain as like Morgan Wade and a few of those dudes, like that just, you just want big. Yeah,
big. That was it. And Cali had a big, a big bonsai in, it was just a big jump, right? And I would love these big one-hit jumps. That was like, I would always excel at a contest that had like a big one-hit, or at least a bonsai, or like one smaller jump and then a big jump. So, yeah, man, and so I was able, just like later on, just keep riding and, get to do what I love. And
you're still riding.
Still riding and doing all that, and
real quick, let's talk about when you listen to Ron's podcast, and the funny part that you say that you just cracked you up, talking about like your new job.
Yeah. So I've been at Apple for
So you work at Apple
a little over 4 years now. It's amazing, right? It's
you work at like the big
Yeah, I work at the big, at the ring,
Yeah,
Apple Park is what they call it. Yeah, it's Spaceship.
Spaceship.
Yeah.
So you work on the spaceship?
I don't work on the spaceship.
But you work in that group.
Well, I work at that building.
Yeah.
My seat's at that building. But when I first started working there, Ron had done a podcast with you. And it was funny because, Ron's like, he's about to drop like, the most mind-blowing comment that you've ever heard.
Because I didn't know yet. I knew
he's like, are you ready to hear the craziest thing? You know what I mean? Like, you could probably do a replay. You could probably put it into this podcast of it. And he's like, Cameron Birdwell's working at Apple. And, like, it sounded like, you had just heard, like, a unicorn just flew by. You're like, what? Are you serious? No, he could not, like, why? Like, instantly, like, selling your stock in Apple. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what's going on?
Well, I got an SE.
Yeah. So, that's actually a decent phone.
I like that phone.
Yeah. And so, when I started working at Apple, I played that part of the podcast for people, just that part. Yeah. and they got it. They got a kick out of that. Yeah. So that was funny, but it is crazy, right? And there's
well, it's cool because now you probably can bring some experiences to the table that none of these people have ever even seen or dealt with in their life.
Yeah, and a lot of it is. It's given me, it's sort of the same feeling of, it's given me a lot of the same feelings that bikes did. You know what I mean? It's something I'm passionate about, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it and working on it, and it's sort of a big game there, right? You're trying to, do everything, and it's an amazing place to work, but it's fulfilling. You know what I mean? And one of the biggest things is that once I started working at Apple, I cleaned up my act a lot. But like when I started working at Apple, full slate clean. You know what I mean? You know me now. I don't drink. I don't party. I don't do anything. Right? I live, a pretty healthy, clean lifestyle. All the way around. And but I made that decision. Going to Apple because I recognize that I blew one opportunity in my past, and getting to work at Apple again was a chance, for better or worse, to make right. You know what I mean? To really, and I was able this time to say, hey, I got a chance. It's like, imagine if I could go back in time and, when Redline sent me that contract, imagine right then at that point if I just said, I'm done right now. I'm done. That's it. I'm just going to do... I'm going full bore.
There would have been a lot of broken red lines.
Yeah, there would have been a lot of broken red lines, right? There would have been a lot of broken... But it was like when I started working at Apple, it was like that chance for me to go back in history and make that decision right then of dude, I'm just going to focus on, focus. You know what I mean? And that's what I've done. You know what I mean? And so, and by doing that, it helps me sort of I get to move past I dealt with a lot of regret, you know what I mean? And now that regret is more gratitude, you know what I mean?
Well, now you have a good job. You're still riding.
It worked out the way it is.
You're married, you have...
I got a kid on the way, I'm married. I mean, I got everything.
You're happy.
I'm happy, but, and so that, it turned in for me just sort of, being grateful for the experience. And, it's something that, I can sort of help other people with, and I help a lot of other people with it. It's part of what I do now is I help other people and try to help them, make the right decisions. So it's been good.
Good. Try to think. Do you think we left anything out? Here, hold on. Let me check the Instagram messages, and then we'll see what we got here. I posted it up kind of late. We'll see what we got.
Just being a person that knows Cam since he was, a teenage kid, and just watch it go fucking full circle is just a fucking amazing story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because you've always been kind of an elder statesman up here, Well,
one year I was here, it was New Year's. And I believe it was either 99 New Year, it was 99 New Year's. It was 99 New Year's, and I was here, and I had either just gotten the thing from Redline or was just about to get it. And I was here, and I remember it was the Y2K scare, right? And I came over here, And I remember you, in your own way, telling, hey, you should chill on the party end. You know what I mean? You were trying to you should chill out on the party in a bit. But people don't chill till they're ready. You know what I mean? That's part of the problem is you really have to want to change for yourself. And it took a lot of bumping up my head against the wall before I realized that there's a much easier way. So.
All right, we're going to run through some of these guys.
All right.
So, Ground Chuck, Isaac McRae.
Yeah.
You want to know who your biggest local riding influence was growing up?
My biggest local riding influence? Let me think about that. I mean, Miron was always my hero, but obviously he wasn't local.
Yeah.
I would say, probably... locally, it would have been Ryan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It would have been Ryan because, when you're in that era and, you've got someone who's like just as good as you, and you're kids, but you're trying to be the man, right? And you're just you're consumed. It's just like a constant contest, right? It's a constant contest of like, he's doing this, I gotta do this. I'm doing this, he's gotta do that. You know what I mean? And it's very clear cut who's doing the better tricks at the time. So it was like, I would say that, who was I, looking up to? It was Ryan. It was just constantly trying to stay at his level or, be better.
How fun is it riding with Ryan nowadays? Now that
now he's just like, Ryan's Ryan, right?
Yeah.
But it's fun. We got to go out to the unit, and I've ridden a lot with Ryan throughout the last years, and he's filmed a lot, and he's a legend. You know what I mean? He's a legend all the way around, and I'm proud to call him one of my really good friends, and have been there around since the beginning. So it's nice now to be older like this and having gone our paths.
Yeah.
And now we're sort of back together as good friends.
First Rule BMX. I don't know who that is, but we kind of touched on a little bit. He wants to know if you have any good tales from the van or any other ramp club shenanigans.
Tales from the van, like the 2-hip van?
I'm assuming that's what it is.
Well, I will tell you that the first time I drove was, I was telling you that the other day.
That's a good one.
So I was on the first year of tour, 15, and it was not easy for my parents to let me go on that tour either, right? It was only 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right, and they were like, I don't know, like it was to Texas and back. And we're driving, and it's the middle of the night, you're swapping drivers, it's like a good old tour, and like, Birdwell, can you drive? And of course I'm
Who are you on tour with then?
It was Lee Ramsdale, Ron, and a Flatlander.
Sean Peters?
I think it may have been Sean Peters. I think it was Sean Peters.
Okay.
Yeah, I won't say I'm positive, but I think it was. But we're driving, and they said, like, can you drive? Can you drive? And I'm like, yeah, I can drive. And I remember just being, 15, with everybody sleeping in the van. I'm blaring, rap music, smoking cigarettes, driving across the New Mexico desert.
And you never drove?
Never drove, and they're letting me drive. And that thing was
it stick or automatic?
No, it was just a big old 2-hip van,
Okay,
automatic. But the box, once you would go too fast, would start, because it wasn't wider than the van, right? So it would start weaving, and so they're like, when the box starts fishtailing, they go, just let off the gas. Don't hit the gas. Don't hit the brake. Just let off the gas. And right? So I would just be driving, and then like you could feel the van start to go like this, and I just let off the gas and like go slow and like let it go. But that was a good one. But in the van, that thing was so sketchy, man. That whole van. But one time we broke down. I remember we broke down in the middle of the night. The tire blew out, and I remember Ron going, just drive to the show. We called him. We're like, we're not going to make the show in the morning. He's like, just drive it. And we're like, dude, we are not going to drive that thing in the middle of the night. But we ended up getting some like hoopty spare that like barely fit like 3 of the lug nuts on and ended up driving. But that was a crazy one. Ramp Club shenanigans, I think we talked about.
Yeah.
And, I don't know what the...
Ramp Club shenanigans were like every night.
Yeah, Ramp Club shenanigans were every night. And I don't know what the... what is it, the time frame where you can't get in trouble for anything, so I probably can't tell those stories. I'll probably have to wait a few more years. Statute of limitations. I got to wait till the statute of limitations go out before I can tell all those stories.
Nick Ford 13 wants you to know that your two-hip rock and roll section is proper and ahead of its time.
Yes.
And then he just wants to know how you went about getting the job at Apple.
Oh man, you know what? One of the best things I did is for one, BMX helped me with that, right? I went into the interview. When I went to the interview at Apple, I was already working, right? It wasn't like I didn't have a job. I was working somewhere else. Went in with the frame of mind of, I got a job, so I'm good. Don't be nervous, right? And I thought, well, what am I going to do to stick out here? I thought, I'm just going to be so fucking enthusiastic, right? I'm just going to be like on top of it, like, I'm ready to change the world type of attitude. And, also I realized that, like, when it was like a long panel interview, like, hours of interviewing, and it's a panel of different people. And of course, when someone comes in and first thing they say is like, they look at the resume and they see BMX, right? Boom, they're sold, right? It's a wrap. You just start talking about BMX. You want to push the limit like BMX. You don't even have to talk about anything else.
You share that passion of BMX.
Oh yeah, you just go off, right? You don't even have to talk about your technical abilities, right? It's just the person's sold. But when someone comes in and they go on to like the next part of the resume after BMX, then BMX isn't part of the topic because you can already tell they don't care. Right?
Yeah.
They see it on the resume. They're either going to ask because they care or they're going to skip over it because they don't. So like half the people I knew, basically, I was able to, talk about BMX and be enthusiastic. And the other half, I was just up on top. I'm writing on the whiteboards. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to change the world. I was just enthusiastic, which I am a lot of the time when I'm passionate about something. But, I sort of just went over the top.
Yeah.
With everything, and I got the job.
It worked out. Jay Simmons Design says, writing for Two Hip and working for Apple, two of them are both iconic brands in their own right. He's like, do you actually see any parallels between the companies?
Well, I'll tell you what. I had Ron come to meet me at lunch at Apple campus.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I had him meet me at Apple campus, and I'll tell you. And I'm pretty sure you see how Ron dresses in his attire, right? Let's just say he fit right in there. You know what I mean? Like, it was nothing new. Like, no one's going to bet, he walked through in his getup. And I would say that probably some of the crossovers are very open mind, very free thinking, do it your own way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of parallels in that. I'd say Apple probably has a little bit more attention to detail, but yeah.
Ron stuff. He's done some iconic stuff.
He does. He's done some stuff, and Ron's a legend, and he does things his own way.
Yeah.
I've always had a lot of respect for Ron, even to this day. He is a different
Ron
type.
lives his life the way he wants.
The way he wants it, and
he's so happy.
Yeah, and I will say, and I was telling Oscar this the other day. Some people said, "Oh, this and that," and I'll say, you know what? I rode for Ron and traveled for Ron for a long time, and Ron never did me wrong, not one single time, ever did he stiff me or do anything wrong. Ron always did exactly what he said he was going to do. He raised a family. He did things his own way. He never, never burned me, never burned anybody else I ever saw. You know what I mean? And to this day, he's 53 and he's throwing mega ramp and, traveling around the world doing his own things. The dude's a master of life.
Yeah. Sick Matt wants to know, talking about the Transit 9 part, he goes, everything, all exclamation, was bangers for the time, but he goes, how long did it take you to film it? Because he says it felt like it was filmed in just a couple days.
It was filmed in two parts. Part of it was in Norcal, half of the section, and then half of the section was in Nashville. And I probably filmed for about, I got a total of probably 4 or 5 days of filming in Nashville, and it was probably 4 or 5 days of filming in San Jose.
How many video parts do you have? Is it just that one and rock and roll?
There's rock and roll. There's the sick videos.
And the sick videos are NorCal videos, right?
Yeah, Transit, Backtrail. Backtrail's like an iconic NorCal video.
And then you have a lot of stuff in a couple infection videos.
A couple infection videos, not really parts, right?
But just a fair amount of footage.
Yeah, and there's a fair amount of footage like that in a bunch of videos.
Yeah.
But as far as sections, was always like the two-hit videos. I don't even think Degenerates had a section. It was more of just clips.
Yeah.
In Degenerates, but Rock and Roll was a section. But Transit was, even though it was like in my sort of dark era, I'm most proud of that part. You know what I mean? Like, I felt that I came
Well, you're riding a 10-pound...
street with no brakes.
10-pound two-hip
and nobody knew I rode street.
A chromoly pork, which I picked up just a second ago.
Yeah. And nobody knew that I rode street when that video came out.
Which is funny because in the early infection videos, you actually have.
I did ride some street in there.
You do like a half bar spin to grind down a ledge to half bar, which was really ahead of its time.
Yeah, the marble ledges there in Concord.
Yeah,
but that one, it was over a period of a few days. The crooked cross up I had to come back to like 2 or 3
How many tries did that take you?
It took me a few, and it really hurt, right? Because I do hard X.
Oh, hard X, yeah.
Right, I do hard X over, and it, so since I'm doing a crooked like that, you have to over X.
Yep.
You have to over X, and it's hard.
And to keep the pinch on the bike for the crooked grind.
And so I kept being able to get into it, but like you have to wait till your front wheel is all the way cleared before you can straighten it. And so when you hit straight down onto your elbow.
You pile drive yourself out of it. Yeah, I think that's about it. So anybody you want to thank or anybody?
I want to thank my wife for still letting me go on my bike trips and hang out with my friends.
Which you've been doing a bunch of. I love seeing the nose pick bar and baldy.
Yeah,
I love so.
But just
watching this guy going like breaking out like his old bag of tricks that he hasn't done in a while with like the X up nose picks, the X up nose pick to bar. I mean, one time session in here, he's almost pulling full bar spins and nose pick. Yeah. And just watching him go through stuff. I mean, just to see it all over again, it's just been awesome.
Yeah. So and everybody, all my friends that were there with me along the way. And, just that never gave up hope, man.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cam.
Thank you.
I love seeing you like this, and I appreciate it.